"Hasn't Admiral Sakazuki returned yet?" Ross asked the Rear Admiral. The Rear Admiral shook his head and said, "Not yet." Ross oohed, and left the room without a trace and closed the door. Then he ventured to investigate Kizaru's and Aokiji's rooms, confirming that neither Kizaru nor Aokiji had returned and they were still in Impel Down or halfway on their way. Aokiji, Kizaru, Akainu, all three admirals are not there. Marine hero Garp is not there either. That is to say, the only remaining powerful forces in Marine headquarters are Fleet Admiral Sengoku and alternate admirals Momosagi and Tokikaki, plus a retired Admiral Black Wrist Zephyr. This is not enough staff. Ross showed a sneer at the corner of his mouth. After a cold light flashed in his eyes, he came quietly to the bottom of the Marine headquarters fortress. After hiding his traces, he took out the cursed blade Murasama from his waist and gently inserted it into the base of the Marine headquarters fortress. The toughness level of Marine headquarters is beyond question. Even Whitebeard was only able to shatter its top and middle structure with his powerful attack and failed to completely blast the entire fortress and completely collapse the fortress. But this tough defensive power was easily penetrated by Ross's sword wrapped in the power of distortion like tofu. Although there is sea stone in the internal structure of the base, it can still be destroyed in front of current Ross. He holds the cursed blade Murasama, and after concealing his traces, he inserts the blade into the bottom of the fortress. The more obvious traces of the stones are connected along the trail. It's like taking a chainsaw and turning it around a very thick tree. At last, leaving only a small portion of the connection, Ross stopped and calmly returned the cursed blade Murasama to its sheath and turned to the port. "You're back." Shiryu of the Rain hides in the darkness. He has been quietly releasing his Kenbenshoku, observation, but he only released it in a radius of 10 meters around him. When Ross came back, he noticed it in advance. When he saw Ross holding the handle of the cursed blade Murasama in his hand, Shiryu of the Rain's face changed slightly, with a vague idea that was not very good, and he couldn't help asking, "What have you done?" "Nothing. I got the log pose we needed, and by the way, first process the Marine fortress a little for the next big scene I will make in the Marine headquarters." Ross grinned, revealing his white teeth and smiling in the sunshine. Sneer. The next moment, Ross swung his sword at the harbor. A large battleship in the harbor, under Ross's sword attack, was crushed. It broke from the mast inch by inch, spreading all the way down, and finally, it was completely broken into pieces. Shiryu of the Rain. His eyes widened almost instantaneously and he lost his voice. "Hey buddy, this is the Marine headquarters. It was already a mad plan to sneak in here to steal a log pose. Shouldn't we just run away now?" Suddenly, the whole harbor was blown up in an instant by sudden changes. Many Marines first stared, then all showed their horror. A large battleship was destroyed. It was the battleship docked in the headquarters harbor. It was destroyed by some kind of power. Who did it? Who is so courageous that he dared to destroy a battleship in the Marine headquarters? Damn it. Save those people. Someone invaded the Marine headquarters. Sound a level 1 alert. After the captains in the harbor reacted, they screamed, and several Rear Admiral and Vice Admiral almost immediately pulled out their swords and looked vigilantly around the large battleship. At this time, Ross no longer hides his traces, so his body shape was revealed and he walks to the front of the harbor. Shiryu of the Rain shook his head a few times before following Ross. It seems that the main force of headquarters is not there, but it will still be very dangerous to do this. He guessed Ross might have found out that Aokiji, Kizaru, and the other main players were not there, but as Fleet Admiral, Sengoku must be in the Marine headquarters, plus there could be some other existence, and the risk of their capture was great. "Isn't it dangerous to compete with Yonko, 4 emperors?" Ross asked a question, slanting his sword across the harbor and sweeping away. "See." The harbor, made of one of the world's strongest minerals, under Ross's sword, was instantly cut open with crack thousands of meters in length. The outer side of the ring wall is cut in an instant. "You are captain, I'll just follow you." Shiryu of the Rain saw that the situation had already become like this. Now he stopped thinking about everything else. His eyes showed a cold shimmer. He also shot a sword attack at battleship inside the harbor. See. The sword directly cut the 2 large battleships from the center, as if cutting the model of the 2 ships, but also opened an abyssal crack in the sea below. That is, Ghost Hand Ross, and Shiryu of the Rain. The Marines on the harbor finally saw the figure of Ross and Shiryu of the Rain. After seeing them, almost everyone was stunned. Didn't these two people just escape from Impel Down? How come they suddenly appeared in the Marine headquarters? However, Ross and Shiryu of the Rain didn't give them any time to think. The two seemed to be in the contest, and they shot their sword attacks in succession. The sword light and the power of distortion interlaced with each other and destroyed them. Even the strongest marine fortress harbor was like a piece of bread under their swords. It was continuously cut apart and various large battleships were constantly being destroyed. Damn! Stop it! A headquarters vice admiral, furious, snarled at Ross and attacked him with his sword arts from far away. But his sword energy was weaker than Shiryu of the Rain and it couldn't do anything to him, not to mention Ross. Ross lifted his left hand in the air and pressed it. The sword energy was like a snake, and it was contained in midair. Then Ross grabbed and pinched it with his left hand. Boom! The sword energy instantly collapsed. Once upon a time, a headquarters vice admiral can pose a great threat to him, but now those same headquarters vice admirals, except for Garp, Momoshiki, and others at their level, are almost powerless against him. Finally, just as Ross and Shiryu of the Rain destroyed the harbor in less than half a minute, an angry roar came from the marine fortress. Stop this madness for me! Fleet Admiral Sengoku rushed out of the top office and was in midair, giving off a golden glow and displaying his devil fruit power. Zone Hito no Mi, model. Daibutsu, Sengoku, transformed into a golden Buddha. He didn't expect Ross to join hands with Shiryu of the Rain to escape from prison. What's more, Ross and Shiryu of the Rain were so bold that they would attack Marine headquarters after escaping from prison. Lawless. Absolutely lawless. Buzz. Sengoku launched himself towards them in the form of a giant golden Buddha and attacked Ross and Shiryu of the Rain with a terrifying shockwave. Today's Sengoku is still at his peak power and the entire Blackbeard pirates vomited blood when hit by this attack at the end of his tenure and flew backward. He was able to confront Whitebeard at his peak period. This palm has not yet fallen. The terrible shock caused the fragmented harbor to break up again inch by inch, and numerous cracks appeared on the gravel as they were broken into a grain of sand. Distortion shock. Faced with Sengoku's attack, Ross's eyes surged with battle intent. Now, he can deal with any admiral in one-on-one combat and he has a great chance of victory against them. Only the existence at the level of Garp, Sengoku, and even 4 emperors can arouse his battle intent. Ross also launched a palm filled with the power of distortion. If Sengoku's shockwave is to make a circular arc and impact in front of it, and Whitebeard's tremor fruit, Gura no Mi, is a form of space fragmentation, then Ross's power of distortion is to make distortion appear in space. The empty void seems to be transformed into something transparent and sticky, squirming and squeezing together, light and sound, all of which are naturally distributed here. Bang! An earth-shattering sound rang. Under the angry blow of Sengoku and the hard shock of Ross's all-out efforts, the ruins in the center of the two men completely collapsed and exploded, shaking the earth and shaking the whole marine headquarters. Most of the base was cut off by Ross, leaving only a small connected area of the headquarters fortress, which also showed a little fragmentation under the shock. However, at this time, everyone's attention was focused on the harbor and nobody noticed the anomaly of the headquarters fortress. At this moment in the harbor, Ross's power of distortion completely slammed against Sengoku's attack. In the aftermath and squalor, the whole person only retreated 3 or 4 steps in the ruins and then stabilized his figure. And Sengoku, who was opposite him, also retreated a little backward in 2 steps. He was able to match the attack of Fleet Admiral Sengoku. How can it be? Some of the vice admirals and rear admirals of Marine headquarters watched this scene with horror in their eyes. Many of them had followed Sengoku, who was once an admiral, and they had seen Sengoku's strength many times, but Ross was able to block this strength head-on. This kind of strength is more terrifying than the rumors. His strength has reached this level? This is bad. Looking at Ross in front of him, Sengoku couldn't help but be shocked by the strength displayed by Ross. He had just attacked in his anger, but he did not hold back his strength at all. However, although this strength has outperformed Kizaru and others, but in the face of 2 admiral, he will be defeated. He may not be so easy to escape. Sengoku does not understand how Ross escaped from Impel Down and then came to the Marine headquarters as if nothing had happened. Is it really because of Kizaru's sloppy attitude and lack of seriousness, as the Aokiji report suggests? Sengoku's anger rose again as he watched the almost fragmented harbor being destroyed. As the Marine Fleet Admiral, the harbor of Marine headquarters was destroyed and he would not be able to escape responsibility. Marine Fleet Admiral, Sengoku, this is the first time we met, it's really different. Ross, who was much smaller than the Golden Buddha, stood quietly in the ruins and slowly retracted his palms and calmly looked at Sengoku. Sengoku is overwhelmed with anger and his face is cold as he said, although I don't know how you escaped from Impelled Down, but here is the Marine headquarters, you're not qualified to go wild here, you troublesome boy. After the voice fell, Sengoku looked sideways at Shiryu of the Rain behind Ross and said with an ugly face, Shiryu, is this your choice? A warden turned into a pirate. And what? Shiryu of the Rain holds the second-generation demon blade, sipping a cigar. He looked at Sengoku and said slowly, I was locked in the 6th floor of Impelled Down, never to see the sky again. Sorry, I don't like that kind of living, so now, I am with him, and I will take care of his enemies in the future. Sengoku heard this and he became angrier. He bit his teeth and stared at Ross and Shiryu of the Rain. He suddenly jumped up and slammed his palm towards them. If this is the case, then first as the Marine Fleet Admiral will execute you two here on the spot. Buzz. The impact was not much more violent than the previous one, but it was pushed down from the top, not only containing the impact force but also the attack power from Sengoku. On the spot, if you can do it, you are welcome to try it out. Ross's eyes narrowed and he held the cursed blade Murasama. He poured the power of distortion into the blade of the cursed blade Murasama, holding the hilt and slamming it towards Sengoku. Buzz. The power of distortion surrounds the sword edge, allowing the surrounding void to appear in the form of distortion, forming a sharper, nearly single-point attack than the last time, colliding with Sengoku's impact attack. The shock and distortion frenzies intertwine. Sengoku's impact can't contain cursed blade Murasama's penetration, and Ross's power of distortion can't contain Sengoku's gold-cast Buddha's hand. Ding! Under intense pressure, Sengoku's golden palm touched Ross's sword tips and made a crisp jingle. At the same time, the aftermath of the shock and the distortion confrontation finally erupted and swept the land apart and cracks appeared on Ross's feet, spreading in all directions. Shiryu of the Rain can still hold his figure. As for some vice admirals and rear admirals nearby, they are forced to use their power to hold back their figure in the aftermath. The weak marine soldiers are swept back by the strong wind and fell into the sea with countless stones. I don't know how long it took. The aftermath dispersed. Ross stands on the ruins. The only piece of the area that is slightly intact is at his foot and it also presents a dense crack in it. He held the position of holding the sword, pointing its tip to the sky, against Sengoku's dark golden palm. Sengoku's strike was finally exhausted, and he still couldn't do anything to Ross. He could not help turning over and landing more than 10 meters away. The shape of the big golden Buddha is really hard. Ross slowly retracted his sword and opened his mouth to Sengoku. He did not hesitate to let his body bear part of the impact. He concentrated the power of distortion on the sword edge and tried to pierce Sengoku's palm. But Sengoku's Buddha form, combined with the terrible armament Haki, was so defensive that it could not be pierced at all. But Sengoku was more shocked than Ross. He had just attacked with all his strength and Ross was able to withstand his impact attack and Ross did not even show any signs of injury. His impression of Ross's ability is that he should be a Paramecia, not a Logia user that can withstand the impact of his attack without taking any injuries, which shows that Ross's physique has become strong to inhuman level. It's completely blocked. Shiryu of the Rains clenched the hilt of his sword and converges a little. He originally planned to fight Sengoku with Ross if Ross could not resist him alone. After all, now he and Ross are like a grasshopper on a rope. There is no other way. It's unrealistic to turn around and run away. If Ross falls, he can't escape alone. Sengoku's expression is slightly repressed. The first hit was out of aggression, while the second hit detected Ross's physique and armament Haki, both of which had no weaknesses. If you can't find a weakness for a person of Ross's level, it will be extremely difficult to deal with him. Once you find a weakness, it's easier to win using that weakness. Whiz. The next moment Sengoku shot out again. His huge body shape did not affect his speed as he jumped and came in front of Ross, a palm pressing towards him. This time, instead of an intense explosion, he abandoned some of his offensive power and tried to find Ross's flaws with speed and defeat Ross with a consistent strike. But just as he rushed to Ross's observation Haki had already captured his movements and he took a step toward the left. The whole person suddenly crossed a large distance and appeared on the right wing of Sengoku and swept his foot towards Sengoku's back. What? Sengoku's pupils shrank. Although his observation Haki was strong, It was not up to the level of future prediction. Ross's trajectory in his perception was very weird, as if he had done something he should not have done. In the face of Ross's unexpected move, Sengoku could not cope with it. He could only upgrade his defense to the highest level. His waist was also directly attached to a deep layer of armament haki, turning it into a dark golden color. Boom! When Ross kicked, Sengoku's body seemed to be a huge golden ball, slamming toward the ruins on one side, slamming and smashing a watchtower. All of Marine, who looked far away from this sight, didn't expect this scene to appear, showing a look of horror. Fleet Admiral Sengoku was kicked by Ross, bang long. The stone watchtower was broken and Sengoku reappeared in the ruins. He was not injured, but his face looked very unsightly. Ross had just moved and he couldn't figure out what was going on. Ross has shown great strength in attack, speed, defense, physique, and haki, almost without any shortcomings. Such strength has far exceeded the analysis and judgment of Ross in intelligence. Wicked, Sengoku could not help grinding his teeth at the thought that Ross might have joined Marines in the beginning. But because of the garbage on the bottom of Marines, Ross now stands on the opposite side of Marine, and Sengoku couldn't help but hate it. But at this point, there is no use thinking about it at all. This thought is only flashing in Sengoku's mind for a moment, and he once again rushed towards Ross. No way out. I have to fight. Even if he knows that he can't do anything to Ross alone, he has to stop Ross from destroying the Marine headquarters. Otherwise, once he gets out of here, Marine's face will be completely stepped on by Ross alone and they will become a laughing stock to the entire world. Bang! 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 Sengoku and Ross continued to fight, with distortion and shocks erupting, the whole port shaking, and waves surging from time to time. Shiryu of the Rain on the other side saw Ross completely blocking Sengoku, and he looks at the Vice Admirals and Rear Admiral nearby with a grin on his face and attacked them with his sword. Shiryu. At this moment, a cold and low voice came from the distance and a figure rushed over, holding a sword, and shattering Shiryu of the Rain's sword energy. Seeing someone coming towards him, Shiryu of the Rain snorted. He and Momoshagi go way back. I haven't seen you for many years, and your sword arts have grown a lot. Shiryu. Are you serious? Attacking the Marine headquarters with a pirate? Momoshagi took a deep breath and shouted at Shiryu of the Rain. She used to talk to Shiryu of the Rain many times about sword arts. She didn't expect Shiryu of the Rain to join the pirate camp. Shiryu of the Rain took his cigar and said, "Yeah, so what's next? Can you stop me? It depends on how your sword arts have developed." Whiz. Shiryu of the Rain didn't show any mercy. The sword fell and the sword edge showed a bloody and suffocating rush as it fell toward Momoshagi. Momoshagi, as a top swordsman, naturally would not show any carelessness in this battle. She also immediately entered the battle state, glaring at the coming swing of the sword and planning to counterattack. Ding ding. The light of the sword was staggered and the figures of the two men fought here. Ah, how did it become like this? Tokikaki came late, looking at the harbor and covering his forehead with a headache. He first looked in the direction of Momoshagi and said, "That's a swordsman's fight. I can't participate in it, otherwise, she'll annoy me afterward." Turning his head to look in the direction of Ross and Sengoku's fight, Tokikaki showed a trace of surprise in his eyes. He had seen Ross fight a few months ago and he was sure that he had seen all of Ross' power in that battle. Ross did not possess this level of strength at that time, and now he can go against Sengoku without losing any ground and he may be able to win this one-on-one fight. But now, in just a few months, Ross already has the strength to confront Sengoku and he is almost his equal in battle. This growth rate is almost incredible. He knew that Ross had been detained in eternal hell for a few months. Is it possible for someone to explode with so much strength while being detained in prison? Or, did Ross deliberately lock himself and impel down? Either way, Tokikaki felt terrible. After his face changed, he rushed towards Ross and joined forces with Sengoku to press Ross. Shiryu of the Rain is all right. Everyone already knows him and his strength well, but Ross is someone who he couldn't understand it at all. Now he came to the Marine headquarters. If they let him go, maybe he'll attack the Holy Land Marijoy someday. Whiz. Faced with Tokikaki, who was attacked him from the flank side, Ross's eyes flashed and he launched the distortion space and punched directly at Tokikaki in an attempt to repel him back directly. However, Tokikaki is better than others. His observation haki has reached the pinnacle level and he has received the ability to predict the future. He already saw the scene of Ross's fist crossing the space. Immediately afterward, his face changed and he made an action to avoid it. Sengoku, this guy's attack seems to ignore the spatial distance. I know. Sengoku responded with a deep voice. He has already understood this after fighting him for such a long time. If he still couldn't detect the ability of Ross, he would not be a Marine Fleet Admiral. However, he was aware that this method could not be solved in a short time. He could only use his Kenbenshoku, observation, Haki to response in time. It's like everyone knows Kizaru is the fastest in the world, but no one can find any way to deal with Kizaru in this aspect. Whiz! Sengoku rushed to the front of Ross and slammed him out. Ross dodged Sengoku's attack and appeared behind Sengoku's back and stepped down and trampled Sengoku down from the sky. At the same time, Tokikake's attack came from behind. Ross backhandedly resisted Tokikake's attack and caused Tokikake to flew out. Just then, a shock came from below and flew Ross out. With Sengoku alone, it was hard to win or lose in a short time, but with Tokikake present in the battle and his ability of future prediction, Ross gradually lost interest in battle. After all, it's Marine Fleet Admiral, 1-on-2 is still too hard. Ross wiped a trace of blood from the corner of his mouth and said with a gentle tone while being suspended in the air. Don't make unnecessary struggles, Ghost Hand Ross, we won't let you run away after you destroyed the Marine headquarters in this way. I must use your life to defend the majesty of Marines. Sengoku looked sternly at Ross. He was not confident in blocking Ross in one-on-one confrontation, but with Tokikake and his future prediction ability, it would be difficult for Ross to escape. He was confident that he can hold Ross here. But, at this time, Ross suddenly showed a strange expression, saying, "Destroying this way, do you think it is just like this?" When he heard Ross, Sengoku started a little and did not understand what Ross meant. But at that moment, Tokikake on the other side seemed to see something. There was an expression of horror on his face and he stood with his mouth open. Bad, that's terrible. The next moment, he saw Ross stepping out to the right, and the whole person had already arrived in front of the Marine Fortress, punching a punch and slamming into the Marine Fortress. Sengoku didn't know what Ross was going to do, but he was instinctively aware that he should stop this, but he couldn't match the movement of the Ross's distortion space, and it was too late to do anything. What is he trying to do? Many Marine recruits in the Marine headquarters also saw Ross, who appeared in front of the huge fortress, and saw Ross's punching action. Destroying the Marine Fortress. This huge Marine Fortress, standing in Marineford, is made from one of the world's toughest ores. It is also filled with sea stone and has a unique design. It is not so weak as to be shaken by one blow. Ross's fist fell silently as countless people watched. The power of distortion swung open and hammered into the Marine Fortress. Bang! In the next moment, everyone's face changed and their mouths widened little by little, whether it was a Rear Admiral or a Vice Admiral, or even Fleet Admiral Sengoku, they all stared dead and stared incredibly. Only to see, after Ross's fist fell, it was like the space in front of him became empty. His attack hit and ripples spread out and the layers swayed. His punch hit the center of the fortress, in the middle of the two characters of Marine. The seagull-shaped one represents the flag of Marine. The logo representing Marines, under this punch, showed signs of fragmentation, like a whirlpool of distortion has collapsed on it. But, this is not the real scene that shocked and horrified the people. What really shocked everyone is that the Marine Fortress, which gives them an indestructible, strong and ultimate feeling, broke off from the bottom and collapsed towards the city town behind the Marine headquarters under Ross's fist. One punch. The Marine Fortress collapsed. Quick, quick, there's city town behind, you can't let it fall down. Tokikake saw this scene in advance with his future prediction and took the lead and responded with horror, rushing toward the collapsed headquarters fortress. Fleet Admiral Sengoku also woke up from his dream state and his face changed dramatically. He ignored Ross and followed Tokikake and rushed toward the collapsed headquarters fortress. At the rear of the headquarters fortress is the city town where the family of Marine lives. No matter who it is, their relatives live there, and even Sengoku's relatives live there. If the fortress collapses, the consequences will be unimaginable. Block it. Sengoku tried his best to rush to the bottom of the collapsed fortress when the fortress collapsed nearly 2/3 and tried to prop up the collapsed fortress. However, the weight of this fortress is terrifying. It is almost impossible for human beings to support such a terrifying fortress weight with their bodies. Sengoku can break this fortress, but it is not so easy to carry it up. Quick, come and help. Tokikaki is also holding on to the collapsed marine fortress while screaming at the Venice admirals and rear admirals who are still watching in the horror. Ordinary people simply can't resist this. Even rear admirals has little effect, only those vice admirals can be used to support the collapsed fortress. Because the fortress is too big, except for Sengoku, who is in the form of a big Buddha, no one else has any foothold at all. They can only tread on the Geppo, moonwalk, to fight hard. It's like a mayfly shaking a tree. This, Momoshagi, who is confronting Shiryu of the Rain, is also stunned seeing this scene. She didn't expect to see such a scene. Under the shock, she couldn't compete with Shiryu of the Rain and charged towards the collapsing marine fortress. The entire headquarters is in a mess right now. Screaming and shouting came and went like a fire at home. Everyone rushed to fight the fire. But they could not save Nither could they put out the fire. Shiryu of the Rain looked at the collapsed marine headquarters and stared at it for a long time until Ross walked over to him. He put his sword in its scabbard. Sure enough, joining him was the correct decision. When Sengoku and others rushed to pick up the collapsed headquarters, Ross flew back to the ruined port and waved at Shiryu of the Rain. The two grabbed a battleship and Ross used gravity distortion to fly it in the sky to go away. This bastard, Sengoku screamed while he was carrying the collapsing marine headquarters. He had already noticed that the base of the marine headquarters had been broken, but there was no way he could give up and he could not free his hand to stop Ross. Even if his heart is roaring and even if he can't wait to kill Ross 10,000 times, at this time, he can only let Ross and Shiryu of the Rain fly away. Great Age of Pirates, 16th year. Ghost Hand Ross teamed up with Shiryu of the Rain and seriously injured Impelled Down Chief Magellan. They escaped from Impelled Down and created a legend of them being the second one to escape in the history of Impelled Down and almost completely destroyed the entire Impelled Down prison. Half an hour later, Ghost Hand Ross and Shiryu of the Rain hit the marine headquarters, destroying the Gulf of Marineford and the fortress of the marine headquarters, making a horrible situation and leaving. The Marines failed to stop them. 3 days later, Ghost Hand Ross's hanging bounty was raised to 1.7 billion berries. Shiryu of the Rain's bounty was posted at 1.1 billion berries and the news spread throughout the sea. That's what it said in the last 2 paragraphs of a news report. When we all thought that he became a history, he escaped from Impelled Down and rushed into the marine headquarters, destroying the marine fortress and leaving. There is no doubt that the Grand Line finally ushered in the 5th emperor that ruled it. And that emperor is Ghost Hand Ross, New World. Somewhere in the sea, a marine battleship is sailing on the sea. This battleship is the battleship that Ross and Shiryu of the Rain robbed from the marine headquarters and Ross took the opportunity to take it directly across the Red Line to the New World. Then I'll go there and sail down first. Ross stood on the deck, looking at an island shadow at the end of the horizon and looking down at log pose on his wrist. Shiryu of the Rain stood beside him and saw the far island. In that case, will your men be able to catch up? Maybe Marine and the government will come sooner. Rest assured. Ross said plainly, although they can't get in touch for the time being, they have my Vivre card in their hands, and the news of our escape must have spread all over the world by now. That's good. Shiryu of the Rain took out a box of matches, lighted a fire and lit a cigar and took a sip, and asked, "What are you going to do next?" "I haven't decided yet." Ross turned and paced to a chair on the deck and sat on it. After the addition of the Shiryu of the Rain, the Ghost Hand Pirates force has grown directly, but there is still a certain gap compared to the Yonko, 4 emperors, forces. Shiryu of the Rain has an advantage over people under 4 emperors, whether they are 3 disasters or general stars, but apart from Shiryu, only Haruden can reach the level of 3 disasters or general star. He lacks high-level people. He would be able to stop Yonko, 4 emperors, but Shiryu of the Rain and others can't beat Yonko, 4 emperors, subordinates. If he can recruit a 3rd disasters level force in his regiment, even if they won't reach the level of the Yonko, 4 emperors pirates, they won't be far from it. Except for Whitebeard, they would be able to face any other Yonko, 4 emperors. After destroying the marine headquarters fortress and leaving the marine headquarters, Ross received an unexpected reward, 100 talent proficiency points. Although he did not defeat any admiral and did not defeat the fleet admiral Sengoku, destroying the marine headquarters seems to be an event recognized by the talent system. 100 talent proficiency points. Ross thought about it a little and put 20 points of proficiency to Distortion Fruit so that Distortion Fruit's proficiency jumped over 700 points. After crossing the 700-point proficiency barrier, Ross's power of distortions did not show any dramatic increase. Since Distortion Fruit's proficiency reached more than 600, the increase has not doubled as before but slowed down. From 500 points of proficiency to 600 points of proficiency, his power of distortion has increased by almost 3 times, but from 600 to 700, the improvement is less than doubled. However, based on Ross's current strength, even if it is upgraded once, it is extremely terrifying, just like raising the envelope from 5 kilometers to 6 kilometers, compared with raising the envelope from 100 meters to 300 meters, even if the former only increases by 10%, it is several times more than the latter. For the remaining 80 talent proficiency points, Ross hesitated for a moment and tried to fill in agility enhancement and perceived its own changes. Not surprisingly, in addition to the most direct increase in his speed, the improvement of agility also increases the speed of power of distortion cohesion and launch, and even the speed of distortion space. Ross is now in a very strange field in terms of speed. Depending on the ability of distortion space, he can be faster than Kizaru under certain circumstances, but if it's pure positive close combat, he's still slower than Garp and Kaido, who are at the peak of physical skills, let alone comparing with Kizaru. In addition, the launch of the distortion space also takes time. Although his opponents did not grasp this point well in the confrontation with Kizaru, Sengoku, and others, but this weakness will be grasped sooner rather than later if he continues to fight. Therefore, the speed of his body and the speed of the distortion space are still the most important to him. After perceiving the improvement of agility enhancement and the speed of the distortion space, Ross slightly thought about the 80 talent proficiency points to agility enhancement. Agility enhancement. 380, top level strengthening. Physical enhancement. 500, maximum value. Spirit heart. 0, basic level strengthening. Tenacious. 200, maximum value. Rock. 50, mid-level strengthening. The agility enhancement reached 380 points and there was only a gap of 120 points from the maximum value. According to Ross's judgment, when his agility enhancement gets to the maximum value, his nerve reaction speed should exceed that of Kizaru's, and with the ability of distortion space, his speed will completely exceed Kizaru. If the talent, Rock, is completely full and armament Haki is also full, the tenacious degree of his body will not be much different from Kaido. Maybe there is a similar possibility. If the distortion fruit is full, even if time distortion is not activated, it will definitely surpass the peak of Whitebeard's shock power in the pure power of distortion. His speed will surpass Kizaru, his power will surpass Whitebeard, his body will surpass Kaido, his Kendenshoku, observation, Haki will reach the level of future prediction. This will be his final form. Not far away, Shiryu of the Rain was standing on the outer edge of the deck and looking at the sea. A newsbird suddenly flew over. Hey, the newspaper is coming. He grinned at the newsbird with a cigar in his mouth, pulled a coin out of his pocket, popped it into the pocket around the newsbird neck and took a newspaper in his hand. The newsbird humanized a salute to Shiryu of the Rain, flapping its wings and flying away. Where did you steal the coin from? Ross put away the talent system and looked down at Shiryu of the Rain. He had planned to mourn for the newsbird, but it seems that Shiryu of the Rain had no desire to kill anything but human beings. Shiryu of the Rain opened the newspaper and looked at it as he said, I found it in Battleship and grabbed a little. Well, sure enough, the news of the destruction of Marine headquarters can't be covered up. He grinned with pleasure. Destroying the Marine headquarters fortress. In a sense, this is even more of a big event than the invasion of the territory of the Yonko, 4 emperors, enough to make an uproar in the world. Although the destruction of the fortress was entirely a matter for Ross alone, he did not have any credit for him, but he had some light and was painted with a little ink on the report in this newspaper. His bounty directly reached billion berries. It can be said that his reputation has changed overnight. From being second to Magellan, he suddenly became a terrifying existence in the Grand Line. It's no accident that his bounty is 1.7 billion berries. Ross glanced at the newspaper in his hand and his face showed a hint of laughter. Shiryu of the Rain continued to see the bottom of the page and saw the depiction of the so-called 5th Emperor. He couldn't help but grin and said, maybe the whole world has been turned upside down by now. Then, if you develop with peace of mind for a while, stabilize the position of the 5th Emperor. I'm afraid it would be difficult to develop with peace. Ross shrugged, saw Shiryu of the Rain's eyes, and said, I have killed one of 100 Beast Kaido's men before. It won't be long before that fellow will come knocking on my door. Shiryu of the Rain. However, after witnessing the madness at the Marine headquarters, he has adapted to Ross's behavior. Ross has the guts to destroy the marine fortress. Compared to that, 100-beast Kaido is not so terrible. As a top swordsman, despite choosing to follow Ross, Shiryu of the Rain's goal is not reaching the level of just one of 4 emperors. At this level, people naturally look higher. Above Yonko, 4 emperors, is the king. Only by surpassing Yonko, 4 emperors, can you really reach the top of this grand line. No matter whether Ross and Kaido have a fight now or later, this confrontation is something that will definitely happen, it's just a matter of time. Let's go. Ross took the newspaper from Shiryu of the Rain. After carefully reading it, he threw the newspaper aside and stood up, looking at the island that was approaching in the distance. Gotcha. He lifted his foot and gently stepped on it. The entire battleship began to break down bit by bit from his position. Eventually, the entire battleship was so broken and completely destroyed. Ross raised his hand and waved, the power of distortion sprung, sweeping the current below, charging the broken pieces of the battleship into the distance, and he glided with Shiryu of the Rain to the distant island. Soon, the two came to the shore of the island and boarded the island. This is a large island, and there is nothing on the edge, but the architecture inside the island is very prosperous. It's either a country or one of the territories of a Yonko, 4 emperors. Ross and Shiryu of the Rain are not afraid of exposing themselves. If someone wants to catch them both, they would need at least 3 admiral-level fighters. Obviously, 3 admiral-level fighters can't be easily deployed. Besides, the Marine headquarters is in a mess right now. It's necessary to urgently repair the impel down in the Marine headquarters, and they can't afford to deploy all of their top-level fighters. Wherever you go, the law of the jungle will never change. In the slum on the outskirts of the island, Ross and Shiryu of the Rain watched a shabby poor man surrounded by a group of people getting beaten and spitting blood on the ground. The group eventually left and the poor man who was beaten lay there, not knowing whether he's alive or not. Other people in the neighborhood did not know what the reason was and did not go to rescue him. So you have to be strong, Shiryu of the Rain's gentle said, and followed Ross through the street. Although the poor people on the street and the gang of former assailants failed to recognize Ross and Shiryu of the Rain immediately, they instinctively perceived that Ross and Shiryu of the Rain were not easy to mess with, and they all gave a wide berth to let them pass, showing completely different attitudes. Yes, that's why we should be strong. Ross smiled faintly. He did not see the murderers or the poor, so he crossed the street with Shiryu of the Rain and disappeared at the end of the slum. After passing through the slums, what appeared in front was the gradually prosperous area. I'll get some money and change my clothes by the way. When he escaped from prison, Ross dressed in a few clothes that fitted him, but he still looked very different. He walked with Shiryu of the Rain and looked like a valet. Shiryu of the Rain didn't care about his clothes. When he was put into eternal hell, he was not changed into prison clothes. He was wearing his own clothes, and when he came out, he was still wearing his own clothes. Good. Shiryu nodded, approaching a restaurant. Ross walked down the street, glanced around, looking for someone who didn't look good, and then calmly educated him and took the tuition. After a while, Ross returned to the restaurant, completely replaced with his nondescript clothes, dressed in a very elaborate shirt and a dark trench coat. The cursed blade Murasama was wrapped in black strips and hung around his waist, hiding in the dark windbreaker. This blade was very uncomfortable to use at first, but after several days of training, it has been much easier to use. Oh, it looks much better. Shiryu of the Rain cut off a bloody cow and put it into his mouth. Ross ordered a 9-point steak and said, "Never make me look like a follower. Next, I'll stay in this island for a while, but I didn't realize that the world-famous Happy Street is right here. I'll look at it later." Now that Robin is not around, there isn't even a capable person who can collect and categorize intelligence. "Oh, do you like that kind of place?" Shiryu of the Rain said in a less enthusiastic way. "What's the meaning of that place? It's all about women who are powerless. It's better to look for places like arenas or something similar." Ross looked at Shiryu of the Rain in a weird look. Shiryu of the Rain said strangely, "What's wrong? Is it anything I said?" "No, it's nothing." Ross shook his head and said, "Let's split up then." Happy Street. This is one of the most famous entertainment blocks in the world. The whole street is full of places like casinos and bars. Every now and then, a nobleman passes by with 1 or 2 beautiful women in his arms. If he remembers it correctly, the ruler here should be one of the secret undercover agents of the world government subordinates CP0, Stussy, Queen of the Pleasure District. However, Killing a normal CP0 member will produce no rewards for him at all, so Ross isn't interested in her at all. To come here is simply to enjoy and see if he can bump into luck and meet Fujitora again. If he can get Fujitora aboard, it will be much less difficult to fight against the Yonko, Four Emperors, pirate regiment. When Ross stepped into Happy Street, in a luxury building in the middle of Happy Street, a beautiful figure was standing at the window with Den Den Mushi in her hand. Ghost Hand Ross and Shiryu of the Rain are here. Do you want to take action? They need to be dealt with in the long run. On the other side of Den Den Mushi came the voice of one of the Gorosei, 5 Elder Stars, and he said in a low voice, "But you can try it, any means can be done." Understand. Stussy nodded gently and hung up the Den Den Mushi. On the other side, one of the Gorosei, 5 Elder Stars, was sitting in his office of the highest level of the world government. He thought that Ross was able to get out of Impelled Down. He didn't expect his strength to increase to this level. He even destroyed the Marine Headquarters fortress. Although Ross's power is not enough to compete with Yonko, 4 Emperors, whether it's his current strength or his name at the sea, it is no exaggeration to call him the 5th Emperor. This is the situation that Gorosei, 5 Elder Stars, didn't want to see at first. Marin Fort and Impelled Down are rebuilding. If we want to deal with Ghost Hand Ross and Shiryu, we have to mobilize at least 2 battle forces above the Admiral level. Can we even do that right now? Is it even appropriate? No matter whether we can or can't, we have to do this. A Gorosei, 5 Elder Stars, squinted and said, compared with White Bear and 100 Beast Kaido, Ghost Hand Ross pose a greater threat to us. They would rather let other Yonko, 4 Emperor, exist than let Ross develop. Whether it is Whitebeard or 100 Beast Kaido, they generally don't take the initiative to find trouble with the government, nor will they take the initiative to attack the Marines. But Ross is different. Whether it is the Dressrosa incident or the Impelled Down escape or the attack on the Marine headquarters, it proves that Ross is a threat to the government, both in strength and in thought. Ghost Hand Ross and Shiryu of the Rain will not be so easy to annihilate, but they have provoked 100 Beast Kaido before, and with Kaido's character, he will not let them go easily. If that's the case, maybe you can pass the message to Kaido. We can't put all of our hopes entirely on Kaido, we must also send troops out. The Gorosei, 5 Elder Stars, talked to each other and eventually turned the plan into a single order and gave it out. Happy Street. Located in the central luxury hall, there are some high-end sofas, tables, and chairs, and at the forefront is a delicate stage. This is the most central place of Happy Street. Various beautiful women will take turns to perform on stage. If she is fancied by someone, she can be taken away after spending a sum of money. Naturally, this only happens within the Happy Street area. In a corner of the hall, Ross was sitting there in a very lazy position against the soft sofa, holding a glass of wine and looking at the dancers on the stage. "I didn't expect you to come here, it was my mistake to not welcome you, Mr. Ross." In the rear, a beautiful woman wearing a white hat came slowly and sat opposite to Ross, smiling gently at Ross. Ross's eyes shifted from the dancer to her, and after only one look, he recognized the identity of the other party, Stussy West, Queen of the Happy Street. Naturally, this is only one of her identities, and the other is the member of Cipher Pol, the highest level of world government intelligence. Apart from being powerful enough to protect Tenryubito, CP0's hidden members also involved in many roles in the dark underground world, and the organization itself is enormous. "You know me?" Ross took a sip of wine and asked plainly. Stussy smiled and said, "I read about your deeds in the newspaper that I got a few hours ago. Nobody expected you to come out of Impelled Down and do something so earth-shaking. Now I'm afraid that even the 4 Emperors will be shocked." Speaking of this, she paused a little and smiled lightly. "Right, forgot to introduce myself. I am the owner of Happy Street, you call me Stussy." That is really disrespectful, to call someone's name directly like that. Ross had nothing to do at this point, so he doesn't mind playing with the CP0 undercover agent to see what tricks she could make. Stussy grinned slightly and looked like Princess. She looked like an aristocrat whose identity as a hidden CP0 membership could not be seen from the surface alone. "I can't afford the word disrespect. You are now the 5th Emperor of the New World. It is my pleasure to be here." With a faint smile, she turned to the dancer on the stage and said, "Ruth is one of our trump cards. How do you like her? How many points would you give her?" Ross is also looking at the stage. The dancer had blonde hair, fair skin, like a fairy, wearing exquisite and bare clothes, covering only a few key parts. Each of her action is fantastic. Well, 87 points. Ross looked at her for a while and replied without hesitation. Stussy smiled and said, "It's Mr. Ross, who really has a good eye. Ruth only has 87 points. I don't know what kind of beautiful person can get the full score here for you. The remaining 13 points are not so easy to get." Ross glanced at Stussy with a slightly deeper look. Stussy felt vaguely what Ross was saying, but could not understand it, so she stopped talking and responded with a smile. After a while, she looked at the dancer on the stage, Ruth, and said, "I didn't expect you to come today. I haven't had time to arrange a special program, but the girls here are free for you." "Oh?" Ross looked over at Stussy and said, "So, are you free?" Stussy put her hand on her chin and said, "I have a lot of young and beautiful girls here. You don't want to look at an old woman." As she spoke, she noticed that Ross's glass was empty, and her eyes glared slightly. She waved to the waiter not far away and signaled for a drink to come. Soon, 2 glasses of fine wine were placed on the table. "Here's my signature wine. Would you like to try it?" Stussy took a glass from the table and took a sip, smiling at Ross. Ross lifted his glass, sniffed it under his nose, and nodded. Not bad, but when Stussy thought that Ross was going to drink, Ross gently put the glass down and suddenly raised his hand and snatched the one in her hand. "But still, this wine glass looks better." Stussy's face remained unchanged, and she said with a smile, "You like it?" Ross slowly lowered the glass and a bit of amusement flashed in his eyes. He leaned forward, pointed his finger at Stussy's chin, and said, "It's almost time for the little tricks to stop. Can you tell me what your CP0 will do next?" Understanding the words, her ears violently trembled. Stussy reluctantly kept her town fixed, said, "What are you talking about? CP0 is the government's intelligence agency. Although I have some intelligence channels, how can I know how they act?" "Really?" Ross smiled and pushed his palms forward and pinched her tender neck. Stussy subconsciously wanted to resist, but her mind flashes, knowing that no matter whether her identity is really exposed or not, resistance is meaningless in front of existence like Ross. So she did not make any resistance. "Madam Stussy. Stop it. What are you doing?" The people in the hall noticed the abnormalities on this side and instantly became confused. Ross pinched the jade-like neck of Stussy and his 5 fingers were lightly forced. He saw that she did not put up any resistance, only revealing an innocent and praying eye. He could not help but gently smile. If he hadn't known the plot, he would have wondered if his memory had gone wrong. "So she's one of those who can remain patient. That's easy to do. Let's see how long can you endure." Ross's thoughts moved and Haoshoku Haki swung open in an instant and there was a moment of silence in the hall. Whether it was the dancing ladies who tried to rush over with their weapons or the frightened aristocrats, they all acted in a moment and fell unconscious one after another. His fingers moved down Stussy's neck, grabbed her collar, and suddenly pulled hard. Sneer. The white dress top instantly shattered. Huh, please don't do that." Stussy gasped, her hands blocking her body, her eyes sparkled with fear, and she still looked like an ordinary person. Ross stood up, looked at her lightly, bypassed the coffee table and walked towards her. Sigh. Stussy's dress was torn apart in an instant. She retreated timidly but never used Marine's Rokushiki or any other power. Ross was not in a hurry, so he slowly went forward, watching her retreating steadily, and finally pressed her on the brilliant wall. Just when Ross was going to do something, suddenly a shock came from the window on one side. A man in yellow leather appeared at the window. Instead of looking at Stussy, he stared at Ross in suspicion. "Ghost Hand Ross? Weren't you being held and impelled down?" Wings of Sky, Fishu Ermin. He met Ross once in the Sabodi archipelago and later heard that Ross killed a Tenryubido. He was amazed at Ross's boldness. Then came the Dressrosa incident and the news that Ross was defeated by Marine and imprisoned in Impelled Down, Eternal Hell. Unexpectedly, nearly a year later, he met Ross in Happy Street. "I was getting bored, so I came out." Ross turned his head and looked at the Fishu Ermin, who appeared in the window and faintly said, "I haven't seen you for a long time, but I didn't expect you to be here." There was a burst of Haoshoku Haki and I thought it was someone strong here. I didn't expect it to be. It's amazing to be able to come out of Impelled Down. "Well, am I bothering you?" "No." Ross pushed his palm forward forcefully and the wall pressed by Stussy instantly showed dense cracks. Then the whole person ran through the wall and disappeared. Fishu Ermin frowned, and his mouth shook slightly. "It's a merciless start. You really are a dangerous person." Ross shook his head. No, she would have probably caused some trouble for me down the line, and she will attract the influence of the mysterious forces of the government, so it is almost here. Fishu Erman. Ross took back his fingers and turned to look at him. It seems that you didn't read today's newspaper, but it doesn't matter. I am missing a sniper on board. Here we go again. Fishu Erman rolled his eyes and said, look at what you're doing. Everything about you is so dangerous. If I get on your ship, won't I be chased and beaten by Marine Admiral every day? Ross smiled faintly. If you're talking about a team of Marine Admiral, that's about the same, but if it's just a Marine Admiral who leads the team, I don't think he's going to chase after me. Well, your tone has certainly got bigger after escaping from Impelled Down. Fishu Erman's mouth twitched slightly, and after looking at Ross, they moved almost at the same time. He made a sharp leap in the rear, crossed an arc and landed on the far roof, while Ross smashed through the window and ran after him. Seeing Ross coming after him, Fishu Erman grounded his teeth and took out a handful of peanuts from his pocket and shot them at Ross. I remember that your bounty is 1 billion. I haven't got such a high reward before. It's good. If you can win, then I'll go with you on your ship. If you can't win, then I will accept the reward of 1 billion. Good. Ross looked calmly and waved his hand. The peanuts that suddenly flew over were all fixed in the air. They turned into a whirlpool of distortion and were finally kneaded into a ball. Seeing this scene, Fishu Erman's eyebrows slightly wrinkled. He is vaguely aware that Ross's strength was much stronger than the last time he met him. With a serious look in his eyes, he took out a coin from his pocket. Destruction Artillery. The coin was attached with dark armament Haki as it ejected toward Ross. At the moment of its pop-up, the coin accelerated wildly under the power of speed fruit, and like a thunderbolt arc in the air, it broke through the speed of sound in an instant and headed for Ross. Bang! How can it be? Fishu Erman looked at the scene in front of him, his pupils shrank sharply, and he couldn't help but make an incredible sound. In front of him, Ross was suspended in midair, his body motionless. He just extended his palm and caught his destruction artillery with his open palm. Good ability. After Ross commented, he pinched the coin and immediately attached it to the power of distortions. The air distorted around the coin as it rotated as if it was an invisible whirlpool. See. Ross tossed the coin back. Feeling the power of the blow, Fishu Erman's face changed dramatically. He dared not give a second thought to it. His wrist shook and a golden gun was in his hand. Boom! He pulled the trigger at the incoming coin, and a bullet with golden light burst out, shooting precisely into the center of the coin. The bullet accelerated abruptly under speed fruit, wrapped in a strong impact force, crashed into the power of distortion, and eventually burst into the air with both bullets. Can't win. Fishu Erman's eyes showed a dignified look at the result of the collision. He had just basically done his best, while Ross looked understated, but the result of the confrontation was evenly divided. In other words, the current possibility of him winning over Ross is extremely low. It slipped away. Sensing that it was difficult to outdo Ross, Fishu Erman was amazed at Ross's change in strength, and at the same time, he decisively inspired speed fruit. The whole person suddenly accelerated and disappeared into a shadow. However, just as he retired, Ross moved and stepped forward in void. Buzz. The strange power swayed and space was layered with distortion. The whole person seemed to accelerate in time. In the blink of an eye, he jumped 7 or 8 times in a row. Fishu Erman, who came to a faraway place, looked at Ross with amazement. After he took a step, he caught up with him and appeared on his side. Whiz. Ross sweeps at Fishu Erman's leg. Fishu Erman did not hesitate to avoid it and under speed fruit. His movements are still much faster than Ross. Ross stimulated the power of distortion, sweeping directly to the front. Boom. Although Fishu Erman avoided the front leg sweep, he was still flying backward by the power of distortion, smashing 3 or 4 buildings in an instant, and smashing into the street. Cough. Cough. How could this be? Fishu Erman coughed violently and his mouth was filled with blood. He stood up with the rubble and looked at Ross floating in the air in the distance. He had some doubts about life. When he met Ross in the Sabaody archipelago, he thought he had a sure chance of winning, but it was difficult to kill Ross and it was in the Sabaody archipelago, so he gave up. But, in just 1 year, he met Ross again and he couldn't even beat him. No, it's not that he can't fight, but that he's almost crushed. Unknowingly, there's already a huge gap of strength between Ross and him. It was at this time that a newspaper was blown by the wind and just fell in front of him. Glancing carelessly through the newspaper, His eyes were instantly fixed. Escaping from Impel Down, destroying the marine fortress. New World's fifth emperor. The lines written in the newspaper made Fishu Ermin's heart vibrate, and when he looked at Ross again, he had an incredible look on his face. Ross did not attack again, looking down calmly at Wings of Sky. Fishu Ermin. In the Sabodi archipelago, he did not really have a good chance to win against Fishu Ermin, but now he has overtaken Fishu Ermin in all aspects except for speed. Although his speed is a bit slower, it can also be compensated by other aspects. It is difficult for Fichux Ermin to escape from his hand when it is a one-on-one fight. Whiz. The confrontation between Ross and Fishu Ermin continued for a short time, but it was very big. It had already alarmed Shilyu of the Rain on another street, and he heard the news. Seeing Ross in the air and Fishu Ermin below, Shilyu of the Rain squinted slightly and said, "Who's this guy?" Shilyu of the Rain has some concerns about the various types of pirate prisoners, but he has little knowledge or interest in Pirate Hunter. But Shilyu of the Rain doesn't know Fishu Ermin, but Fishu Ermin has heard of Shilyu of the Rain. There are some descriptions of Shilyu of the Rain in the newspaper. Looking at Ross and Shilyu of the Rain, Fishu Ermin knew that he couldn't escape. He looked up at Ross and finally showed a bitter smile. "You win. I am willing to join." If it was the former Ross, he would not easily bow his head even when facing the other side and Shilyu of the Rain, but now Ross is not like his old self. He escaped from Impel Down and created chaos in the Marine headquarters and is regarded as the fifth emperor. As one of the emperors of the sea, in this situation, he can lay down his pride, because the other side is already above him in both strength and fame. Besides, Shilyu of the Rain is also a follower of the other party. "Welcome." Ross smiled and fell from the sky. Shilyu of the Rain pushed back his blade into its scabbard. He stared at Fishu Ermin with a little momentum. Fishu Ermin is willing to join Ross and is willing to become Ross's subordinates, but his attitude towards Shilyu of the Rain is different. In the face of Shilyu of the Rain, he is not afraid. "You must be strong if you caused the captain to invite you." Shilyu of the Rain does not hide his own intentions. In the pirate group, Ross's status is definitely unshakable, but the people under Ross are going to have a difference. Now that he has identified his position as number 2 in the Ghost Hand Pirate Regiment, he naturally wants to establish his position in front of the newly joined Fishu Ermin. "So do you. How about a contest sometime?" Fishu Ermin narrowed his eyes and stared at Shilyu of the Rain. He said before that he joined the team after losing. He fled immediately after finding that he might not win. As a result, Ross cut him off. He was also a face-saving person. He had already made decisions and choices. But joining the Ghost Hand Pirates, he could not be the cadre at the end of the ranking. How to compete for the highest position under Ross, in addition to Ross, other people who also want him to obey, but it is not so easy. "Okay, let's get out of here first." Ross doesn't mind Fishu Ermin fighting against Shilyu to determine their position, but this is not the place for two of them to fight, and Fishu Ermin was hurt a little, so it's not fair. After Ross's voice fell, Shilyu of the Rain and Fishu Ermin both converge. Whether it is Shilyu of the Rain or Fishu Ermin, they all have to listen to Ross. The authority of the captain is unquestionable. After a few hours of rest, Shilyu of the Rain and Fishu Ermin are still in conflict with each other. After all, it is necessary to use a battle to determine the status of both sides. Ross did not forcefully stop it. Because this kind of thing prevents meaningless quarrels later, the three people came to the island on the east coast. With the strength of both of you, it may take serious injuries to distinguish the victory from the defeat. This is not the case at this time. Ross stopped and yelled at Shilyu of the Rain and Fishu Ermin. Shilyu of the Rain and Fishu Ermin looked at each other, and they did not intend to fight for life, just to test who is strongest among them. Shilyu of the Rain murmured, "Then use injury for the win or lose. Whoever gets hurt first loses." Fishu Ermin shook his head and said, "No, it's too hasty. It's better to base it on 3 times. Whoever has minor or major injuries 3 times loses." "Yes." Shilyu of the Rain nodded. They retreated to stand face to face at a distance of 10 meters, while Ross came to a reef and looked at the battlefield with his hands on his back. "Start." As Ross's voice fell, Shilyu of the Rain and Fishu Ermin moved at the same time. Whiz. Shilyu of the Rain crossed a blood-red arc, and the second-generation demon blade in his hands cut across the battlefield instantaneously, directly spanning more than 10 meters. Fishu Ermin evaded Shilyu in an instant, pulled out 2 golden guns and fired at Shilyu. Ding! Shiryu swung his sword and the bullet collided with the blade and was cut in half by his sword edge, but it also made his blade buzz. Blood cross sword. The blade flips, sweeps, splits and cuts the bullet. At the same time, it triggers a cross star's bloody chop and sweeps toward Fishu Ermin. Fishu Ermin dodged. Shiryu of the Rain stepped out one step and followed him sharply. He swung his sword across and waved a hollow blood sword energy. Fishu Ermin leaned back and bent into a huge curve, avoiding Shiryu of the Rain's chopping and pulling the trigger at him continuously. Snapshot. Bullets burst out of his gun chambers, carrying golden sparks, and attacked Shiryu of the Rain at the speed of breaking through the sound barrier. Each bullet was wrapped in a tremendous impact. One sword flow, snake belly sword. Shiryu of the Rain's second-generation demon sword turned into a blood-stained shadow, sweeping in all directions, cutting the flying bullets and enveloped Fishu Ermin in the attack area. Fishu Ermin's body, under the influence of speed fruit, is like pressing the fast-forward button, twisting sideways and so on. Every action is fast and out of line. He has more than enough edge in his attack power like Shiryu of the Rain, and he occasionally fires his gun to fight back. Snee. Fishu Ermin was the first to be injured after dozens of consecutive battles. His sideburns were brushed by a sword edge, which belonged to Shiryu of the Rain and could not be completely avoided. At the same time, however, a bullet grazed Shiryu of the Rain's shoulder, leaving a scar on Shiryu of the Rain's shoulder. Splitting. Shiryu of the Rain's glare is cold, holding the second-generation demon sword. He suddenly split out one after another blood-colored sword energy, like the wind rainstorm generally that shrouded Fishu Ermin, trying to block all of his escape directions. Fishu Ermin twisted his body and kept dodging among the sword energy, but some. At this point in the battle, both of them generally know each other's strengths. The blades of the sword energy attack were too strong to penetrate through the crack, so he fired a bullet, which instantly shattered the sword energy. Shiryu of the Rain keeps pushing forward, trying to fight Fishu Ermin in a close-range battle. As a swordsman, he is naturally strongest in close combat, while Fishu Ermin keeps his distance from Shiryu of the Rain as he is naturally good at long-range attacks. ZZ. From time to time, bullets and sword energy fly uncontrollably in the direction of Ross, but both bullets and sword energy slowed down sharply within 3 feet of Ross as if they were eroded by some force. One by one they are contained and eventually annihilated. Shiryu of the Rain is very close to Fishu Ermin in terms of strength. The difference between them is that one is a swordsman and the other is a gunner. The two continued to confront each other. Fishu Ermin took advantage of his speed fruit's ability to kick Shiryu in the lower abdomen when he was close to him, but at the same time, he was also affected by Shiryu's sword energy that left a bloodstain on his back. Both sides have been injured twice, and both their attack and defense have become extremely cautious. However, even if their strength is closer to each other and they are more cautious, the passage of time will eventually be able to divide the winners and losers. Fishu Ermin was the first to be injured for the 3rd time, and a blood mark was drawn on his temples. You win. Fishu Ermin stopped and muffled at Shiryu, not very happy with the results, but in a life-and-death battle, he was not sure who would win. It was hard to say who would live or die. Compromise. Shiryu returned the second-generation demon sword into the scabbard at his waist after consolidating his position of the number 2. His expression is much better than that of the Fishu Ermin. In any case, the battle between the two men had been done. After looking at each other, Fishu Ermin was a little dissatisfied, but he said nothing. They both turned to look at Ross. However, when they turned their heads, they found that Ross wasn't looking at them. Instead, he was standing on the huge reef, standing with his hands on his back and looking at the distant sea. Looking in the direction where Ross was looking, they saw a black shadow at the end of the sea. Looking closely, it was faintly recognizable that it was a ship. Are they your subordinates? Shiryu came over and asked. Ross didn't answer but continued to stare at the black shadow, until the shadow got closer and closer and it became clear and clear. Here they are. The ship was a huge ship and the entire hull was extremely large. It was not a large sailing ship, but a giant ship that Haruden and others took. For them to come here so quickly, it seems that Lafitte and others were in this sea area, and after discovering that he has come out of Impel Down, they come all the way to here. Fishu Ermin also came over and stood on the other side of Ross. If Ross can stabilize his position as the 5th Emperor, then the Ghost Hand Pirates will become one of the 5 Emperor pirate group. This ship is the foundation of the future. Crack. As the ship approached the shore, a figure had already flashed towards the shore, wrapped in a thundering arc, and it appeared almost instantaneously on the shore. "You're back." Haruden looked at Ross with a hint of excitement. He had planned to break into Impel Down to rescue Ross several times before, but he was stopped by Law and Lafitte, who calculated that he would have almost no chance of success. As a militant giant, he will not give up because of the extremely low success rate. He even nearly fell out with Lafitte, Trafalgar Law, and others, and almost directly led other giants to charge into Impel Down. "Well, I am back." Ross nodded back at Haruden. Shiryu of the Rain and Fishu Ermin looked at Haruden with a slightly surprising eye. From their perspective, it was easy to see that Haruden had the power to control thunder and lightning. A giant ate the rumble fruit. Ross's ship is filled with crouching tigers and hidden dragon, just the thunder giant of Haruden. If they fight, they will not have absolute certainty to win. After all, rumble fruit is one of the closest invincible fruits in the legend. Now, the ship gradually come ashore and the people on board began to jump one by one to the shore. "Welcome back, Captain." Lafitte put his hand on his hat, took it down using his fingers and put it on his chest, and welcomed Ross by bowing to him with a weird smile on his face. Trafalgar Law was carrying the demon sword on his back and did not speak, but he also had a cold and resolute smile on his face. "Captain Ross." The giant ship Dr. Girth rushed over. She wanted to embrace Ross, but she couldn't do it because of her figure. So she grasped Ross in the palm with both hands. The 5 giants came ashore one after another. The last to come was Robin. Like Law, she hid her emotions best and one could hardly see her inner feelings. She walked over to Ross and came next to Ross. Girth suppressed the emotions in her heart and put Ross down. She apologized. "No, sorry, Captain, I was a little excited." "It's nothing, don't mind." Ross smiled at her. He may have been seriously injured just now if he was an ordinary person, but he is not an ordinary person. Even if Girth uses all of her strength, she wouldn't be able to deal any damage to him. Ross's gaze swept through Lafitte and others, and finally fell to the nearest Robin, and he looked at her for half a second before smiling. However, just as Ross was walking towards Robin, Robin's nose moved slightly, and her smiling expression fluctuated slightly, staring at Ross with a mirth of laughter. "What did Captain do before? The smell of perfume is quite heavy." Ross's movements were slightly stiff, and he glared at Girth. Without waiting for him to speak, Robin smiled and said, "Girth never used perfume." Lafitte and Law and others saw this scene. They all looked over and saw it as if they didn't see it, and Shiryu of the Rain ignored it and went to Lafitte and others. As for Figuex Ermin, he blinked and thought of something, and a little smirk was present on his mouth. "Don't mind the small details." Ross took his eyes back from Girth and responded to Robin without changing his tone, and walked forward, passing by her side. As he walked past Robin, Ross used the ability of distortion to send a message in her ear. "Something small has happened. I'll talk to you in the evening." Robin's face remained unchanged, with a faint smile, and she did not respond until Ross walked past her. "Ha ha. 2 new cadres will be added to the ship in the future." Ross saw everyone's emotions calm down and came to the front of everyone. He said in a calm tone. First, he introduced Shiryu of the Rain and said, "Combatant, Shiryu of the Rain. Another person who makes the Iron Wall of Impel Down together with Chief Magellan. He has long been famous." "Oh." Lafitte picked his ceremonial hat and said to Shiryu of the Rain. Trafalgar Law stood there calmly. Robin stood quietly on the side of Ross's side and glanced at Shiryu, and she regained her gaze and did not speak. As for the giants, they all stood there and did not speak. Ross is their captain. The decision was made by Captain. Even if he recruited 100 people, they would not speak. "So, please take care of it later." Shiryu of the Rain doesn't mind. It's impossible to integrate instantly into a new group that has already been formed. He doesn't mind if he does integrate or not, he only recognizes strength. After introducing Shiryu of the Rain, Ross pointed to the Fishu Ermin not far away. "Sniper, Fishu Ermin, pirate hunter ranked first, the Wings of Sky, but from today on he is not pirate hunter, but the pirate that fell to the sewer." Fishu Ermin is speechless. His introduction is a little more than the introduction of Shiryu of the Rain, but what the hell is that? Just because I didn't join when I was first invited? After all, you still couldn't escape from Captain's offer. Robin stood at Ross's side. She has been with Ross from the very beginning and she had met Fishu Ermin in the Saboti archipelago, but the ghost hand pirates at that time was far from being comparable to the present. Fishu Ermin's strength was very threatening at that time to them. Fishu Ermin had no choice but to spread his hand and said, "Who would have thought that your captain's strength would increase this much in such a short time? I can only join now that I have lost." Robin smiled. Navigator, Demon Sheriff Lafitte. After introducing Shilyu of the Rain and Fishu Ermin, Ross turned around and introduced the Ghost Hand Pirates cadres. Ship Doctor, Surgeon of Death Trafalgar Law. Intelligence, Nico Robin, part-time Captain Secretary. For others, Shilyu of the Rain and Fishu Ermin looked at them and nodded slightly. It was slightly different for Robin, whose position on the ship was obviously very special. Ghost Hand Pirates, Giant Warrior Pirates Captain, the Thunder Giant Haruden. The Giant of Sand, Road, Metal Giant, Stanson. The other two are the Chef Goldberg and the ship's Dr. Girth. Ross briefly introduced Haruden and others, but after he introduced them, he thought of something and asked Goldberg, "Did you use the barrier fruit?" No, Goldberg shook his head. After the Dressrosa event, they got the barrier fruit, but because Ross was not there, the fruit was left unused and kept there. Ross thought a little. The barrier fruit is a good fit for Girth, but he preferred to find the heel fruit in the Tontata Kingdom of Dressrosa, which was more in line with Girth's ship doctor status. If Trafalgar Law is the world's top surgeon, then she can eat the heel fruit and become the top physician with the fruit's ability. Even Fire Fist Ace, whose chest was penetrated, there was a possibility of treatment if a top internal and external surgeon was there. After thinking for a while, Ross took the barrier fruit handed over by Lafitte and placed it in front of Goldberg. Use this fruit. You don't have to worry about kitchen utensils in the future. It is obviously just a joke to use the power of barrier fruit to make kitchen utensils. The real power of this fruit is also very strong, as it can almost ignore most types of attacks. A simple physical attack that contained the power to destroy an entire town can't shake the barrier created by the barrier fruit unless it has the special ability or armament Haki attached to it to a certain extent. Only then can the barrier be destroyed, and even then it would be quite difficult. After giving the barrier fruit to Goldberg, Ross turned his head towards Shilyu of the Rain and said, "If I remember correctly, you are not a devil fruit user. Do you have a specific type of devil fruit in your mind?" Shilyu of the Rain grabbed his cigar and said, "Not yet." As a top swordsman, he doesn't care much about devil fruit, but he doesn't directly say that he doesn't want to be a devil fruit user. Devil fruit's ability is so varied that he may have a favorite type in the future. After the introduction of each other is over, everyone returned to the ship. Chef Goldberg quickly brought out a portion of meat and wine and put it on the deck. The people sat down on the deck one by one. After Ross had a bowl of wine, all the people except Robin, who was sitting next to Ross, took up the bowl and poured it in one gulp. "What happened during the time I was gone?" Ross asked Lafitte and others, who seemed to be all right, but after he was imprisoned in the eternal hell, the government and Marine were sure to pursue Lafitte and Robin. Robin was eating and telling Ross what had happened during that time. It was roughly the CP0 of the government subordinates that were after them, but because Mjasgard's heart was still in their hands, they dared not be too hard. They tried to divide the Ghost Hand Pirates, call Lafitte and others in the distance and then steal the heart, but Lafitte and others are smart people. It is clear that the intention of CP0 is not so small. As for the slightly dull giants, they are completely loyal to Ross. It is difficult to shake them. As for Marines, also because of the heart of Mjasgard, they were just chasing after them for appearance and didn't dare to push too hard. Making use of Law's surgeon fruit capability to take Mjasgard's heart seems to be the most correct decision now. Otherwise, even if Lafitte and others have some strength and ingenuity, it would not have been easy for them to avoid CP0 assassination and Marine's pursuit. "When did you find me coming out and coming over here?" After listening to Robin's statement, Ross vaguely thought of something and asked. Robin's eyes flickered slightly, and she said, "When you came out of Impel Down and rushed into Marine headquarters, we saw a change in the direction of Vivricard, but we were not sure what was going on. We thought you were taken to Marine headquarters for execution." "And then?" Ross ate a piece of meat and continued to ask. Robin stated, "From the Vivricard, we decided that you shouldn't be in a very dangerous situation, so we eventually rejected the possibility of you being sentenced and speculated that maybe you have broken out, so we drove the ship into the sea near Red Line. After that, the Vivricard's direction changed again and we came here directly." Ross swallowed the meat, and his eyes flashed slightly. "There's no need to mention the Marine for the moment, but the CP0 people have been following you for all this time to steal or take the heart back. That is to say, People with CP0 may have gathered on this island. As soon as she heard Ross, Robin immediately understood it and said with a serious look, "But they didn't do it. Obviously they didn't have enough power to deal with us, that is to say." "No need to guess." Lafitte got to the side of the ship, looking at the distant sea, interrupted the words of Robin, and turned and smiled. "Marines are here." Not far on the sea, 5 marine battleships are coming towards them. 5 large battleships. As battleship approached, 2 tall figures, one of them wearing a yellow striped shirt, were visible on the front deck of the 2 battleship in the middle. As for the other one, he was wearing a dark red suit and white marine justice cloak. It was Marine Headquarters Admiral Akainu. Marine Admiral Akainu. And Kizaru. The people on the ship stood up and looked far away at the 5 battleships. Lafitte looked carefully with a telescope and found that Aokiji was not there. He turned to look at Ross and said, "Aokiji is not there, are we leaving, Captain?" "Without Aokiji, it means that the sea will not be frozen, and the ship will not be restricted." Almost as soon as the 5 battleships appeared and approached, on the far side of the coast, 6 figures emerged, all wearing white cloaks, which were the CP0's chief and members. 2 Marine Admiral, plus CP0 chief, the government and Marines' annihilation of the Ghost Hand pirates, is clearly undiminished. CP0 chief and there are 2 Admiral, they really did unleash a terrible force in order to deal with us. Law stood on the outer edge of the deck, carrying the demon blade on his shoulder. There was no overly worried expression on his face as he turned towards Ross. Today's Ghost Hand Pirate Regiment has the ability to retreat before such a lineup. However, looking at the approaching Marine battleship and the surrounding CP0 chief and others, Ross stood there calmly, with no change in expression. "If we ran away every time we meet an admiral, then how can we call ourselves the 5th Emperor and rule the New World?" Ross's words swung calmly on the ship and changed the look on Lafitte and others' faces. They were shocked at first, then each of them showed a trace of bloody excitement. No one showed any fear. Yes. The days of running away after seeing a Marine Admiral have long since ended. Now the Ghost Hand Ross is the 5th Emperor of the New World, and they are already the crew members of the 5th Emperor. How can they retreat in front of a mere Admiral? Now that they have caught up with them, let's have a fight. Sure enough. Shiryu of the Rain holds a cigar and grins. He knows that with Ross's personality, it's impossible for him to retreat directly from a Marine Admiral. Since being locked into eternal hell, Shiryu of the Rain has been trying to vent his anger and frustration. Jailbreaking and destroying the Marine fortress was although a lot comfortable, but it did not seriously scratch that particular itch. He was in a disadvantageous situation and impelled down, and later in the Marine headquarters, the situation was not good from the start as there were just 2 of them, but now, all the crew has gathered, and now facing the Marines is completely different. War. Without Fishu Ermin, the situation on their side would be a little weaker, but with the addition of Fishu Ermin, the situation on their side would not be much worse than that on the other side. I knew it would be like this. Compared to Shiryu of the Rain, Fishu Ermin had some headaches and he put his hand on his forehead, revealing a bitter smile, but since Ross is going to fight, then he will fight with his captain against that Marine Admiral. Stanson grounded the ship completely on the beach. Everyone looked at the coming battleship, and the CP0 members on the other side, all clasping their weapons or fists, and the mood and the emotions were generally surging, which were of the intense warfare and boiling blood. Finally, they have come to this point. They have become the 5th Emperor of the New World, and now they will defend their position. This time as the current crew, all of their fighting forces are gathered together, even in the face of CP0 Chief and 2 Marine Admiral. There is nothing to fear. The next big step is to fight. On the battleship, many Marines had been ready to intercept, but they found that the Ghost Hand Pirate Regiment did not mean to escape, but they put their ship ashore and stranded it, putting on a decisive position. Stupid. Akainu stood in front of a battleship. His Marine's cap was slightly lowered and he said in a slightly sneering voice, did he really become this overconfident after coming out of Impelled Down that he would confront us head-on, or is he betting that the headquarters will not give them much trouble because of our shortage of hands? Is he really that much of an fool? Don't underestimate them, Sakazuki. Kizaru and Ross have fought against each other many times. He knew that Ross is not an idiot person and he must have a reason for doing this, so he warned Akainu. But, for Ross and Shiryu of the Rain alone, even with other crew members, wanting to deal with their joint action with the World Government Secret Agency CP0, it is indeed too arrogant. I won't let them escape. Akainu stood there, looking coldly at the coast, his right arm emitting a hot temperature, faintly turning into the bright red color of magma, which belonged to the power of a marine admiral, so that all around marine showed the color of awe. This time, the Ghost Hand Pirate Regiment will obviously not fight a fleeing battle, but they will confront them head-on, and the tactics and strategies formulated before will naturally change immediately. Report. The enemy has enters the shelling range. After judging the distance, a marine soldier reported to Kizaru. At this moment, all the marines on the battleship could hardly suppress the tension in their hearts. Many people had sweat running on their foreheads. If they were facing an ordinary small pirate group, even without a marine admiral leading them like Kizaru and Akainu, they will not be too nervous. But the group in front of them is already the almost recognized fifth emperor of the New World, and not long ago, their captain broke into the marine headquarters and completely destroyed the headquarters fortress. Most of the marines on the battleship have witnessed the scene of Ross destroying the marine fortress. Even with two admirals with them, it is difficult to suppress the tension in their hearts. This will definitely be a hard battle. Looking at the current situation, it seems that the marines are going against a Yonko, 4 emperors. Full-scale shelling. Kizaru stood on the deck and ordered the shelling to start. The command went on instantaneously, and numerous marines passed orders in succession. The sound of full-scale shelling echoed over 5 battleships, and various heavy cannons had been filled with cannonballs and set on fire. Bang! 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 The heavy cannons on the large battleship instantly ejected a huge cannonball, and the cannonball slammed toward Ross and other people on the shoreline. This kind of giant cannon is far beyond that of ordinary portable artillery. Even if it is a strong one, armament Haki will be able to sway in the explosion. Seeing that the dense first round of shelling is about to fall, Shiryu of the Rain reacted. Rain falls, almost instantly, he pulled his sword out of its sheath and a blood sword energy cut through the void and swept across the sky, going towards the giant cannonballs. All of them were fixed in midair. Half a second later, cracks began to appear on the cannonballs from the middle in front of many stunned marines. After splitting into 2, they exploded in the air. Impelled down City Warden, Shiryu of the Rain. In the smoke, I don't know who spoke in a slightly trembling tone, and countless Captain Marine's forehead was dripping with sweat, showing a trace of fear. He is already a traitor. Don't be afraid, we have the Marine Headquarters' highest battle force admiral standing here with us. Continue to fire, kill the Ghost Hand pirates. Some of the Vice Admiral and Rear Admiral, who can keep the things settled, immediately shouted at their subordinates after they have restrained the shock in their hearts, and instantly suppressed the diffuse fear. Seeing the 2 Admiral Akainu and Kizaru standing in front of the battleship, the numerous marines swallowed and the fear in their eyes subsided. Yes, we have Admiral here. Don't be afraid of these pirates. Marine lieutenants raised their swords and shouted and refilled the cannonballs, ready to launch the second round of volleys on the coastline. However, almost at this moment, Shiryu, who blocked the cannonballs, moved. With a sneer on his face, he jumped up into the air, and his sword attack fell on a battleship. A group of garbage, die. Buzz. The blood-red sword energy tore the sky apart and swept down toward the battleship below. The length of the sword's energy was more than hundreds of meters. At a glance, many marines showed horror and fear. At this time, a golden light suddenly ushered in. I can't let you destroy a battleship as soon as you come up. The golden light converged into Kizaru's form, holding a brilliant cloud sword in his hand and sweeping it down, exploding Shiryu of the Rain's bloody sword energy. Immediately afterward, Kizaru turned into a golden flash as he charged towards Shiryu in the air. He abruptly came in front of Shiryu and kicked him hard with a swing leg. Shiryu was prepared with his right leg was raised and armament Haki was attached to it, and the light speed kick from Kizaru was blocked. The momentum was surging. What is worth protecting a group of garbage, Kizaru? It's absolutely ruthless, Shiryu of the Rain. After joining the pirates, you immediately changed your methods to that of a pirate. Kizaru squinted at Shiryu of the Rain and said, there's nothing I can do about it. I can only take you back as a prisoner and put you in impel down again. Bang. At the moment his voice fell, Kizaru's foot and the part touched by Shiryu of the Rain blasted open, like a heavy artillery explosion, swaying a terrifying wave in the air. Shiryu's withdrew from the aftermath. His face was cold, his body was bloody, and he faced Kizaru fearlessly with a sword. Ding ding dong. So they fought in the air for a time. Blocking Admiral Kizaru, so that's the power of one of the iron walls of Impel Down. Many marine looked up at the fierce battle between Kizaru and Shiryu of the Rain and felt dry-mouthed. Even a few headquarters vice admiral looked shocked by the terrifying momentum. Artillery. Continue bombing. As Shiryu of the Rain confronted Kizaru, marine battleship's second round of cannon fire began, not only from heavy cannons but also from small and medium cannons. For a time, the cannonballs seemed to be like rainstorm, and they fell on the shoreline with a loud crack, as if they intend to break the entire coastline. At that moment, thunder exploded in the field, thunder's net. Bang! The Marines saw the thunder interweaving convergence in the sky, and in the blink of an eye, half of the sky seemed to be converted into a lightning arc. The intertwined thunder wrapped all the cannonballs in it, letting all the cannonballs be in the air, and then one after another they burst apart. In the intertwined thunder, a giant covered in white thunder stood in the sky, and the terrifying momentum shakes the whole audience for a moment. Thunder Giant, Haruden. There were Marine soldiers looking at the Thunder Giant, showing the hit of fear on their faces. Dressrosa's war was broadcast all over the world. In addition to the most dazzling Ross, Thunder Giant Haruden was the most eye-catching one. Its thunderstorm force could be said to sweep the whole scene. Almost no one could match it, and it exerts Rumble Fruit's invincible ability thoroughly and vividly. This power is actually obtained by a pirate. A headquarters vice admiral on battleship had a rather ugly face. He took a deep breath, held a long sword in his hand, jumped forward, and a sword fell on Haruden. Crack! Haruden's huge thunderclap shook and an arc burst out and instantly collided with the sword energy produced by the vice admiral, annihilating the sword energy in an instant. Then Haruden grasped the empty air in front of him, and the thunder gathered in the sky and condensed into a white thunder axe. Then he disappeared from the sky. After a thunder arc flashed, he came directly to the front of the headquarters vice admiral and attacked him with his axe. Crash! The white axe blade is intertwined with thunder, and it contains the power of destruction. The headquarters vice admiral's face changed, although he is proficient in observation haki, but it is too late for him to escape. He holds the sword in both his hands, using the armament haki to its maximum capacity. Bang! The thunder arc flashed, and the headquarters vice admiral's hair instantly became burnt, and the whole person flew back to the battleship below, and fell to the deck, barely keeping steady. Haruden's pupils glittered with thunder arcs, and without any pause, he clasped the handle of the axe in both hands and slammed the axe down onto the battleship, where the thunder poured down like a waterfall. Not good. Block it. The faces of 3 or 4 headquarters vice admiral on several battleships changed, and they all rushed over. Their sword energy was intertwined in the field, and the power of several people was able to block Haruden's blow. Today's Haruden has made the Rumble Fruit powerful enough, and although his strength is not at the level of Shiryu of the Rain and Fishu Ermin, but he's not very far apart. His strength combined with thunder powers is terrifying. Up! A full 3 headquarters vice admirals surrounded Haruden, and they did not dare to face him alone and joined forces. They fought with Haruden and caused the sky to shine with golden light and thunder to flash across it. After 2 rounds of volley, the battleships are already very close to the coast. Ross and Akainu are far away, and both of them can almost see the expression on each other's faces. Ross's expression was always calm as he stood with his hands on his back. The marine justice clock behind Akainu was constantly shaking in the sea breeze, and a repressed momentum spread across the field. Do it! Just as Ross and Akainu stood opposite each other, 6 members of CP0, located inside the coastline, flashed under the light, and suddenly charged into the coast at the orders of CP0 chief. By this time the shelling was over, just as they were entering the battlefield. The 6 members of CP0 or CP0 chief, the newly promoted CP0 vice chief, and 1 sub-captain, 3 ordinary members. Their overall combat effectiveness is even stronger than that of the Don Quixote family. The most annoying mouse that is sneaking from behind, get out of here. Just as the CP0 people rushed over, a roar echoed on the field, and the terrifying sand waves swept up and overwhelmed toward the CP0 member. The giant of the sand rode. Almost at the moment when the sand was diffuse, a silver shadow glittered into countless blades, crossing the sand and shooting at everyone in the CP0, wrapped in horrible sharpness and hardness. Metal Giant Stanson. The 2 giants came out one after another, slowing down the offensive of CP0 members in an instant. 2 ordinary members and 1 sub-captain were dragged by them. CP0 chief did not want to entangle too much with the Sand Giant and Metal Giant. They knew the Ghost Hand Pirate Regiment very well. The 2 giants were extremely difficult to get past. They could not be killed in a short time, either in body or ability. What's more, The purpose of the CP0 chief is to recapture the heart of Tenryubito Myasgard. Just as they crossed the metal giant and the sand giant, a depressed roar suddenly reverberated on the battlefield. They looked up only to see the fourth giant Goldberg rushing towards them. "Don't even think about getting past me, kill him." The CP0 vice chief did not stop but opened his mouth and ordered the CP0 vice chief who was following him indifferently. The CP0 vice chief responded by calmly charging into Goldberg. According to their intelligence, only the three giants such as Haruden and Road are extremely difficult to deal with. The other two giants are just ordinary giants. Although they are much stronger than human beings, the CP0 members are not afraid of them. In front of their level of combat, they can defeat a giant in one stroke. Whiz! The CP0 vice chief jumped up and slammed his legs against Goldberg, slamming 100 meters wide of Rankyaku, Tempest Kick, and then traversed it in a moment, going to the Goldberg. But almost immediately after the chop fell, Goldberg's enormous palm slammed in front of him, and a strange glass barrier suddenly appeared, blocking the Tempest Kick. Iron Wall Giant, Goldberg, J. The Tempest Kick of 100 meters wide fell on the barrier and was completely erased. Not even a trace could be found of it as it was stopped in an instant. What? The CP0 vice chief was taken aback. He didn't expect Goldberg to have this kind of ability. He tried his best to kill the other party in an instant, but the result was that his attack was blocked by the other party. Goldberg sees that the attack of the CP0 vice chief can't hold against his own barrier. Surging with warfare, he controlled the barrier to protect his body and rushed towards the other side. The barrier area that barrier fruit can manufacture is limited, but this limitation will continue to increase its area as the ability of the devil fruit continues to develop. For the giants, after eating barrier fruit, the base area of the barrier is enormous. After covering the body surface, it is like steel armor. Damn! CP0 vice chief tried to break through Goldberg, but Goldberg was fearless after wearing a barrier armor, not only blocking him but also fighting other CP0 members. In desperation, the CP0 vice chief can only join forces with his subordinates to suppress the three giants and prevent the three giants from causing greater damage on the rest of the battlefield. CP0 chief caught the rear situation of the battle and his face under the mask was very indifferent and cold. He did not expect the ghost hand pirates to have hidden this strength. But it is impossible to reverse this situation with this alone. There is Marine Admiral Akainu holding Ross on the front. No one behind Ross can stop him. Lafitte can't, Trafalgar Law can't. In front of his top fighting power, even if everyone joins hands, they will be killed. Standing on battleship, Akainu, who had not yet done anything, saw CP0 chief's action, and his eyes flashed. His face raised slightly as he looked down at Ross. "You escaped from prison carelessly, and did some damage in headquarters while I was away. Because of this, did you lose your eyes? Ghost hand Ross." Akainu looked at Ross indifferently. If Ross and others chose to flee at the beginning, it would have been very difficult for them to fight any battle. But Ross chose the most foolish action, that is to fight them. Now he is stuck in a stalemate. Even if he wants to flee, he will pay a price. But, just as CP0 chief was about to rush to the front, a helpless voice suddenly sounded. "You're CP0 chief, I can't help it. I'll be your opponent for the time being, but don't put too much weight on it." Sneer. Along with the moment when the sound fell, a fierce sound broke through the air, and he saw something that he didn't recognize shot at him at a very fast speed. CP0 chief's face changed slightly, subconsciously waving his arm to resist, using armament Haki and Tekai, iron body. Bang! A loud bang sounded. CP0 chief was shocked by the strong impact and the whole man swayed back 2 steps. At this time, he also saw clearly what the thing that was shooting at him was. It was a coin. He looked up and looked forward, and the face hidden under the mask became very ugly as he stared at the figure appearing in front. "Wings of Sky, Fishu Ermin, you actually joined the pirates." "No way. I like to gamble and I lot a particular bet, so I joined them, and being one of the crew members of a Yonko. 4 emperors. No. The 5th emperor did not seem like a demotion." Fishu Ermin pinched 2 coins and flipped them back and forth between his fingers. As the #1 pirate hunter, the reputation of Fishu Ermin is not small in Marine and the government. CP0 chief naturally recognizes him. On the field, Akainu's face suddenly solidified in the moment Fishu Ermin appeared, while Ross, who had been calm, said in a slow way. "If I remember it correctly, Doberman should be your subordinate, that is to say, everything about me. You should know the whole process clearly." While speaking, Ross looked up at Akainu and said with a dull look, "Now, I want to ask if you have a little bit of regret?" Akainu's fists were pinched tightly, showing a fiery red color. His whole face looked very depressed and gloomy. Watching Ross, half of his arms gradually turned into magma. Now he hates to scold Doberman, but what he wants to do right now is to kill Ross with magma bank on the spot. By now, Ghost Hand Pirates Lafitte, Law, and others also made all the moves. With vice admirals, rear admirals and other captains and soldiers of Marine headquarters and members of CP0, the war has broken out in an all-round way. Unknowingly, you have gained tremendous combat power, but even so, today, this place will be your burial ground. Akainu slowly said. Ross's side has more battle power in form of Fuso Ermin, which was beyond his expectations, but even then, this battle just turned from a one-sided battle to a fierce battle. As a Marine, it is absolutely impossible for him to back down in the face of pirates. Today it is necessary to defeat the Ghost Hand Pirate Regiment. As his voice fell, Akainu's eyes shone with cold light and the whole man jumped up, his arm turned into a huge magma fist that fell head-on towards Ross. The decisive battle broke out. Big fire. With Akainu's punch, the magma surged into a huge magma fist, wrapped in horrifying temperature and momentum, and fell head-on to Ross. Many Marine, caught up in the fierce battle, felt a scorching heat sweeping the battlefield, and could not help looking sideways, with a look of surprise and awe in their eyes. Admiral Akainu's power, magma, this is Admiral's ability. Not everyone has seen Akainu's attack and power. Some ordinary Marine soldiers feel awe in their hearts at the moment. Meanwhile, their spirit rises with Akainu's attack. Bang! The magma fist suddenly fell. Ross stood there, his eyes were calm and his face remained unchanged. Faced with the magma fist that had dropped with terrible heat, Ross raised his right hand directly and put his hand on it. Buzz! The power of distortion suddenly broke out. Under Ross's power of distortion, Akainu's magma fist begins at its top, assuming a distortion shape, as if it had been inserted by something and churned into a whirlpool, and spread all the way. Feeling Ross's strong power, Akainu's glare sank and with a low cry, the magma fruit's power was once again stimulated, and the magma fist surged up, turning into a fiery hot magma and rushing towards Ross. Bang long! The magma and the power of distortion collide in the air and just like an invisible wall of air traversing in the air, the magma rushes to the wall of the air and splashes around without going forward. Some of the nearby Marines were fleeing into the distance in horror. Finally, the flow of magma was rigidly contained in midair, and Ross only kept the position of the prospector from beginning to end, without any change. It is as if his body and the ordinary palm had stopped the magma in the sky. The scene is unbelievable. Akainu couldn't break through the blockade of Ross's power of distortion. His eyes were slightly sunken as his strength was restrained. He jumped backward, leaving behind a large swath of magma surging in void. Just as Akainu retreated, Ross pressed his palm forward and folded his 5 fingers gently, grabbing them together in the middle. Crash! Under the surge of the power of distortion, the magma that permeates the sky surges like a whirlpool. It is crudely compressed into a sphere of red magma with a radius of less than 1 meter. The sphere of magma is still flowing like a condensed spiral. After compressing the magma, Ross raised his hand and the ball of the magma was suddenly pushed forward by him, falling into the camp of thousands of Marines. Bad, terrible, it is the magma of Admiral Akainu, run! Countless Marine captains fled frantically under the magma in horror. But, the moment the magma ball landed, the power of distortion disappeared from it and just like a bomb, the ball of magma burst open and turned into a mass of magma splashing around, sweeping the battlefield. Akainu looked at the scene with a gloomy face. He stopped the magma ball, but only 2 directions of magma were blocked. The Marine force in several other directions was devastated. He looked gloomy in the face, charges violently into Ross, and punched. Ross's face remained unchanged and his eyes were shining with cold light with his fist ready for attack. Bang! The magma and distortion collided in the air and broke out with great momentum. The hot magma bursts everywhere and Akainu's figure staggers back 2 steps, while Ross is steadily standing in place. Apparently Ross's current power of distortion has already surpassed Akainu's magma frontal attack power. Boom! After Ross forced Akainu back, he followed him and punched Akainu in his waist side. Akainu slammed his elbow and collided with Ross's fist. Ross reached into his clothes and plucked it violently. The cursed blade Murasama was held in his hand, facing Akainu with a fierce chop. Crash! Akainu was instantly split in two by cursed blade Murasama. As a Marine Admiral, with his proficiency in observation haki, it is not difficult for him to detect attacks in advance and avoid them in advance. ZZ. The magma swelled on the ground, and the shape of Akainu suddenly appeared on the right side of Ross. His eyes were cold, and the magma hand pulled fiercely toward Ross's face. Enigami Guren, dog-biting Crimson Lotus. The speed of the blow was very fast, but Ross's observation haki had already perceived it and he had crossed his sword in front of his body. Chang! The magma hit the sword edge of the cursed blade Murasama, and it was splashed around in an instant. Ross held the handle of the cursed blade Murasama in both hands and swept forward. Buzz! The power of distortion hits the whole front area and Akainu, though elementarily avoiding Ross's sword edge, can't avoid a wide range of frontal attacks and is sent flying backward by the attack. Admiral Sakazuki. The Marine in the vicinity was shocked to see this scene. No matter how they look at it, Akainu is clearly falling on a disadvantage in front of Ross. This is the strength of the ghost hand Ross that destroyed the headquarters fortress. Now, Shiryu of the Rain and Kizaru's confrontation is barely balanced, but as time goes on, Shiryu of the Rain is bound to gradually fall into a disadvantageous position. On the other side, CP0 Chief and Fishu Ermin are fighting hard, but like Shiryu of the Rain, once the battle prolongs, Fishu Ermin will gradually lose out to CP0 Chief. Fishu Ermin and Shiryu are still a little bit worse compared to the power of a real Marine Admiral, and that's where the balance of victory and defeat can be determined. Except that the battlefield of the two men was not optimistic. The other battlefields were fiercely fierce. Thunder Giant Haruden, who faced 3 headquarters Vice Admiral alone, still had the upper hand and Rumble Fruit's power was fully exerted. Lafitte faces a headquarters Vice Admiral alone but also shows a state of ease. He has a great chance of winning as the battle continues. Also, Robin continued to strangle the ordinary Marine soldiers. Officers below the captain level could not resist her wide-ranging attacks and were instantly killed in seconds. Trafalgar Law's strength has also grown, and with several giants jointly attacking against CP0 Vice Chief and others, their battle is also extremely fierce and it will be difficult to win in a short time. From the point of view of the situation, Ross has the upper hand, Shiryu of the Rain and Fishu Ermin are slightly inferior, others are in the middle of the fight. In other words, the final victory of battle will be decided by 6 members, Ross, Shiryu of the Rain, Fishu Ermin and Marine Admiral Akainu Kizaru and CP0 Chief. If Shiryu of the Rain and Fishu Ermin can't resist the Admiral and CP0 first, it is their defeat, and if Ross is the first to defeat Akainu, it is the win for Ghost Hand Pirates. The key to winning or losing, it's in Ross, Enigami Guren, dog-biting Crimson Lotus. After being pushed back by Ross, the magma quickly converged and formed a body. Akainu waved his hand before Ross rushed over, and the magma surge turned into a fierce wicked dog shape, spinning and swallowing up to Ross as a whole. Ross snorted and stepped forward without evasion. He swung the cursed blade Murasama in his hand and the power of distortion surged out, splitting the magma in half in an instant. The residual power of distortions poured down and ran the rest of the magma on the ground, making a sizzling sound, unable to condense again. Whiz! Akainu's eyes were cold and he clenched his fists and punched towards Ross violently. The magma suddenly turned into countless fists and poured down like the wind rainstorm. Ross's thoughts moved and the power of distortion came out, the space layers in front of him folded and bent, and Akainu's magma fists fell to both sides, without even touching him. Sneer! Ross held the sword in his right hand and stabbed forward. The power of distortion surges above the sword edge, eventually turning into a glowing ball, bursting out from the tip of the sword and shooting directly at Akainu. Akainu saw that his attack was blocked by Ross's uncanny ability and his face changed slightly. Faced with Ross's attack, he retracted his arms and folded them in front of him. Bang! Glowing, the distortion void ball, the moment it touched Akainu's arms, a terrible power of distortion erupts and sweeps away. Akainu muttered and the whole man instantly collapsed into magma that spread in every direction and for a time no human form. Bakuretsu Kazan, exploding volcano. Akainu, scattered in all directions, did not panic but gave a violent roar. The scattered magma shone with terrible fluctuations and suddenly rose to the sky. During the overflowing magma surge, it seems to be a volcanic eruption scene, tilting down to Ross's head, to bury Ross under the magma. Distortion. Ross looked on indifferently and backhanded with a sword. Sneer. The horrible magma, under Ross's full-blown sword of distortion, split instantly from the center and was stiffened by Ross's sword. After cutting off the magma, Ross stepped forward and directly appeared in front of Akainu and attacked him with his sword. Akainu was ready, pushing his hands forward, and the magma whistled as the whole man fell down. Since Ross has already demonstrated this ability many times before, it has already been logged into Marine's intelligence data, and Akainu has already seen the intelligence report about Ross in advance, knowing the various capabilities of Ross, and has been careful. Snee. Ross split the magma with his sword, while Akainu retreated 10 meters away. With your current powers, it is impossible for you to easily defeat me, who is a Logia user, and you should be able to see that this battle won't last long for your teammates. Akainu stood there with a slightly raised face, clearly standing at the bottom, but he looked at Ross with a kind of overlooking eye. Really? Ross's face remained unchanged, and in response, he swooped down towards Akainu. Distortion. Light explosion. A brilliant ray of light was fired from the cursed blade Murasama's edge and pierced Akainu's eyes at the same time. It's useless. Akainu roared, and half of his head turned directly into magma, unaffected by light. His observation Haki sensed Ross's movements and punched him. Bang! Ross's blade split and the power of distortion collided with magma, and eventually, the power of distortion gained the upper hand, pulling Akainu out again and leaving a bloodstain on Akainu's shoulder. However, this blood mark was only a minor injury, so Akainu didn't care. He snorted, waved his hand sharply, and hit Ross with another huge magma fist. Whiz! Ross stepped forward to the right and suddenly crossed the space and appeared to the left of Akainu. The cursed blade Murasama in his hand splitted towards Akainu. Akainu's body was turned into magma and instantly condensed on the left side of Ross. When it was not yet completely formed, a magma fist had already come over. Ross's eyes were bright and indifferent, and his left hand was shaken into a fist. Bang! The two fists collided in the air and a huge momentum broke out. The waves surged in all directions. The magma continued to smash and splattered, and Akainu was once again pushed back. Ross took advantage of the situation to move forward and did not use the distortion sonic boom. Since Akainu has been prepared for the optical attack method, then he must be also ready for the sonic attack method. In front of the top powers, it is not so easy to create a chance to counterattack by using the same strategy. Just like Whitebeard in the War of the Best, if it had not been for his physical injury, he would not have exposed so many flaws, and his powers would have been even more terrifying. However, the sonic explosion is a small tool that cannot be used right now, but Ross has other positive explosive power, and even if this is known in advance, the enemy would still be unable to resist it and will be affected. Haoshoku Haki. Bang! As Ross stepped down, a horrible Haoshoku Haki skyrocketed and circled in all directions, sweeping the entire battlefield. Whitebeard didn't use Haoshoku Haki in the War of the Best because the Whitebeard pirates had too many people and they were mingled with the Marines. Even with a top-notch control, it was impossible to distinguish between the enemy and the friends. But, currently, Ghost Hand Pirates is a very small group of people, taking the elite route. For Ross, he has enough control to use Haoshoku Haki and avoid only a few people on his own side. Buzz! Haoshoku Haki swept the entire battlefield, and hundreds of Marine soldiers' movements were fixed in an instant. Their eyes turned white and they began to fall to the ground like dominoes. Even Marines' lieutenant officers were only able to stay awake, and the vice admirals and the rear admirals were greatly affected and cold sweat ran down on their forehead. This, Haoshoku Haki. The Marines who had not fallen to the ground watched the people around them fall down one after another and felt a tremor in their heart. They looked in Ross's direction and their eyes already showed a tinge of fear. Shiryu of the Rain and Fishu Ermin, who had fallen slightly in their battle, also stabilized the situation under the effects of Haoshoku Haki, allowing Kizaru and CP0 Chief to put their efforts into action at the moment. Akainu was the most affected. Akainu, standing in front of Ross, was the first to feel the effects of Haoshoku Haki at the moment of its outbreak. Even though he knew Ross had Haoshoku Haki and was on the alert in advance, he could not immunize the effects of Haoshoku on himself. In front of Haoshoku Haki, Kenbenshoku, Observation, and Armament Haki are almost restricted and influenced at the same time. Sneer. Ross's Haoshoku Haki shocked the audience and he attacked Akainu with his sword. Akainu was influenced by Haoshoku Haki, and he knew that the situation was not good. He did not hesitate to choose to avoid the coming attack. he would rather bear the aftershock of Ross's power of distortion. However, the fall of Ross's sword did not inspire the effects that Akainu had imagination. Instead, it was a false trick to pick it up high and put it down gently. If his Kenbenshoku observation, Haki was not affected, he would not be deceived by this kind of trick. Under the influence of Haoshoku Haki, both the mind and the two-color Haki are affected at the same time, showing great flaws for a time. Whiz! At the next moment, Ross's figure flickered, catching up with Akainu in the retreat. He clenched his fist punched. Akainu can no longer avoid it. He was forced to raise his arms to stimulate magma surge while trying to rally armament Haki as hard as he could to resist Ross's punch. But he was originally inferior to Ross in terms of power, and now it is hard to resist. Bang! The punch fell and the magma splashed around. Akainu barely resisted for a second, and the whole person flew backward toward the rear. The power of distortion hit his body, causing him to spurt out blood from his mouth, which was burned and evaporated by magma. Crash! He hit a reef on the coast, smashing it and splashing it. Cough! Cough! This is, after breaking the reef, Akainu gathered his body again in a piece of magma. He had a trace of blood on the corner of his mouth, his clothes were broken, and the whole person looked bad. Kizaru and others were also surprised to see Akainu injured. If the battle between him and Ross stayed at a standstill, they had a good chance of winning, but if Akainu could not stop Ross, the situation would be quite different. It can be said, if Ross and Akainu's battle remained in a deadlock to the end, the only one who would be able to stand from the Ghost Hand Pirates in the end would be Ross, and they will have two admirals and the CP0 chief to face him, as they would be able to beat Shiryu of the Rain and Fishu Ermin. But the Ghost Hand Pirates cannot afford the luxury of remaining in deadlock in this battle. No matter which side, it cannot be so stagnant, especially Ross. To win this fight, he must beat Akainu as fast as possible. Whiz! After pushing Akainu, Ross barely stopped. He followed him with the cursed blade Murasama and continued to attack Akainu. With the previous blow, the balance between him and Akainu is completely skewed, but even so, the whole battle endgame is still unknown, because Akainu still has the power to fight. He is a Marine Admiral and also a Logia user. His endurance and tenacious are very strong. Even if Whitebeard made a full-powered attack, he couldn't directly abolish Akainu. Blasting stars. While charging towards Akainu, Ross raises his foot and strikes the ground, and the gravity distortion excites and covers a large area of the coastline. Almost instantly, the whole earth burst apart inch by inch, flying up to the sky with seawater and gravel, and wrapping Akainu in it. What is this? Run! Many Marines have also been shrouded in the attack. While fighting Akainu, Ross will not let go of this chance to kill a large number of Marines. Seawater and gravel sediments rushed to the sky, engulfing a large number of Marines. Dai Funka, big, great eruption. Akainu was also wrapped in one of the sand and gravel, and then there was a depressed cry from the sand. Bang! Magma burst out, shattering the sand and gravel apart, and many Marines nearby were affected by the aftershocks. They were swallowed up by the magma almost instantaneously, and they could not even scream before dying. It turns out that killing the Marines is also the justice of Marine. Ross spoke calmly and suddenly took a step forward. The cursed blade Murasama in his hand fell sharply, wrapped in the power of distortion space. Akainu was smashed by the blade, and the dangerous situation triggered the unconscious elementalization transformation. Akainu fell down, but the attack still left a terrible wound from the eyebrow to the chest. No, they sacrificed their lives to exterminate pirates. Akainu gloomy looked at Ross's face and did not waver at his words. He shouted angrily, raised his hands sharply, and burst out with countless magma fists that shot at Ross. Akainu's words changed the faces of some Marines nearby, but in front of the enemy on the battlefield, their brain had little time to think. They could only listen to Chief's orders and continue to rush towards Law and others. Good reason, then, please, sacrifice yourself for the extermination of a pirate. Ross floated in midair, looking down at Akainu below, and raising his hand with cold eyes. A giant meteorite with a diameter of nearly 1,000 meters, which has been composed of sand, rocks, and seawater, falls head-on to Akainu with Ross's command. Akainu sneered and said with a cold voice, "I can't die halfway as a Marine Admiral unless trash like you are wiped out on the sea." Dai Funka, big, great eruption. Bang! Akainu slammed into the sky, his arm turned into an unprecedented giant magma fist, crashing into the horrible meteorite. The terrifying collision sound shook the whole audience instantly, and the sea surged with violent waves. The island seemed to tremble for a moment and numerous marines were unstable, and some were even directly wrapped up in the aftershocks, rolling without resistance. This huge blow brought the whole battlefield to a standstill for a moment, and Law and Robin and others had to retreat to resist the aftermath of the outbreak. Crash. The seawater on a giant meteorite nearly kilometers in diameter was eventually consumed by Akainu's magma, and the sediment and rocks were swallowed up by magma, turning it into a terrifying magma ball. Watching Akainu block the terrifying meteorite and create such a terrifying magma ball, many marine spirits were lifted in excitement. But, in the next moment, Ross, suspended in the air, splits his sword. Crash. Under the astounding eyes of countless people, the vast ball of magma was split into two halves by a sword. The aftermath of the power of distortion swelled down, and Akainu's body instantly exploded. Although Ross didn't gather much strength in this attack, Akainu was at the end of his efforts to resist the meteorite. Even if he tried his best to stimulate armament Haki to resist, he still couldn't stop it. Cough, cough, once again. Akainu's body gathered and this time his forehead was bloody, and there was bright red blood flowing from his mouth and nose. He coughed violently as if he had been seriously injured. Seeing this scene, Kizaru and others changed their faces and tried to rush to support Akainu, but were blocked by the sneering Shiryu of the Rain and Fishu Ermin. Whiz. Kizaru just shot a smashing laser and couldn't make it anymore. Ross raised his hand and grabbed it. The laser was pinched in his hand and condensed into a thumb-sized twilight ball, which he threw at Akainu. Bang long. Akainu raised his hand and the magma splashed, blocking the golden laser. Ross continues to rush towards Akainu, who has been injured twice, although not to the extent of serious injuries, but such injuries will gradually affect his performance. Bang. 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 Faced with the injured Akainu, Ross holds the cursed blade Murasama and attacked him continuously with his sword and collides head-on with Akainu, never giving Akainu any chance to avoid him or his attacks. Akainu's Kenbenshoku, observation, is very strong, but Ross's Kenbenshoku, observation, is also very strong. Akainu's armament Haki is tyrannical, and Ross's armament Haki is not inferior to his. In the constant collision, Akainu was completely suppressed in the downwind and he could only continue to fight while retreating continuously and the magma continued to explode. How could this be? Admiral Akainu is. Many Marines looked at this scene with fear in their eyes. This is not the kind of balance of power at the beginning of the fight, the means of each other's confrontation, but now the Admiral is being completely suppressed by Ross. On the other two battlefields, Kizaru was leveled a little because of his support for Akainu, while CP0 Chief gained the upper hand, but it was only the upper hand. He was not as strong as Ross and the situation wasn't in his complete control. If it goes on like this, it will be bad. A headquarters vice admiral, who was entangled with Haruden, felt a chill in his heart. Even though Haruden was extremely difficult to deal with, he did not show any fear, but now his forehead was overflowing with sweat. If Akainu can't stop Ross, the result of this battle will be their defeat. Akainu, who was getting beaten back and forth by Ross in the eyes of the public, was naturally very angry. His constant roaring and screaming stimulated the ability of magma fruits to the limit, making the earth seem to be turned into rolling magma, but he was still unable to stop Ross's offensive. Every time Akainu tried to overload the outbreak and restore the situation, Ross relentlessly returned to the outbreak and knocked it back. Bang. Bang. A sword is shining, mixed with the power of distortion, and the magma is being splashed everywhere. At the same time, the coastline is being torn apart and the sea waves are getting stacked. After dozens of fierce confrontations, Ross suddenly punched Akainu's magma back and kicked it out and slammed his punch between Akainu's chest and abdomen. Puff! Akainu spewed out blood, and the whole person flew backward. To withstand such a blow, even if his body is stronger than other people and even with his strong armament Haki, his element offsetting most of the damage, his viscera is still severely impacted, and it will be difficult for him to recover for a while. Yada no Kagami, 8-span mirror. When he saw Akainu flying backward, Kizaru's face changed, and after repelling Shiryu with a hard blow, a flash of light came from him as he came towards Ross. Rankyaku, Tempest Kick, Extreme. Almost immediately after the Kizaru attack fell, CP0 Chief suddenly roared and pushed Fishu Ermin back just for a moment and attacked Ross from behind. Rankyaku, Tempest Kick, Violence. As if they were of the same mind, when CP0 Chief attacked, The CP0 vice chief also made a concerted effort to break through the giant's blockade and hit Ross from his right side using Rankyaku, Tempest Kick. At the same time, the various headquarters vice admiral in Marine also forcibly supported Akainu by and used their own long-ranged attacks on Ross. Dai Funka, big, great eruption. At this moment, Akainu is also forced to cohere his body. In the mad roar, a terrible blow erupts. Half of his body seems to turn into a fierce magma beast. His black and red body emits palpitating heat and roars at Ross. In this short moment, the top combat powers on the field almost simultaneously launched a storm of attacks on Ross, and all attacks were concentrated on one point. Not good. That's terrible. The faces of Shiryu of the Rain and Fishu Ermin and others have changed. Their strength is slightly inferior to that of Kizaru and CP0 Chief. It is too late for them to try to support Ross. They can only block Kizaru and CP0 Chief and ensure that they won't continue to issue a follow-up attack. As for everyone else's face changes, Trafalgar Law used Room, trying to transfer Ross out of danger, but because of the area's attack wrapped in the influence of tyrannical armament Haki, coupled with the distortion of space, led to a situation where he wasn't able to transfer Ross. It is also very costly to make such a joint blow. One of the headquarters vice admiral was directly hit by the thunder of Haruden and his body was blackened as he fell to the ground, and the advantage that Kizaru and CP0 Chief had in their battle before was also put into the water. But this joint attack is also incredibly powerful, because this is a combination attack done by many powerful people, even if it is not the strongest attack that they can do at their peak stat, but together, the momentum of this attack is more than any admiral attack. Even if it doesn't kill Ross on the spot, he would be seriously injured and unable to fight any longer. As long as Ross is seriously injured, this battle will be completely transformed into Marine's victory. Even if Akainu can't take on the seriously injured Ross, he would be able to hold him in deadlock, and depending upon Ross's injuries he may even be able to defeat him. That situation combined with other local advantages, everything will end. Bang long. Under the indifferent gaze of Akainu and others, but with the change of Robin's face color and the nervous and anxious gaze of Ghost Hand pirates, the overwhelming attack finally converged at Ross's position and exploded. The attack performed by this group of people is so powerful that it is hard to imagine. The ray of light blasted, accompanied by the roar of the magma, the momentum of Rankyaku, Tempest Kick, and the attacks that the headquarters vice admiral desperately sent to rescue Akainu were all intertwined. The area was covered almost instantaneously, and there was a blast that covered hundreds of meters area. The entire coast and the earth seemed to have collapsed. It was like an earthquake, and the island was also shuddering. Crash. The sea surged up into the sky, rolling and surging. Damn it, Captain, Trafalgar Law, Robin, and others almost put down the fight in their hands and looked at the center of the lingering aftermath. Akainu's half-body recovered to its original state. He wiped the blood from the corners of his mouth and looked at the center of the explosion with indifferent eyes. No one could resist such an attack. Even 100 Beast Kaido would not remain intact after receiving such a strong attack. At most, he would recover quickly with his immortal body after being injured. The aftermath gradually dissipated. In that scene, a huge cave appeared in a regular circular shape, covering hundreds of meters of squares, and the bottom of the cave was still vaguely flowing with magma. Is he dead? A lieutenant marine watched this scene and couldn't help mumbling. But almost in the next moment, their eyes were all stagnated, staring at the center of the pit, their faces frozen, gradually showing an almost unbelievable look. There. Ross was floating quietly in the middle of the sky. His eyes were calm with no change from their previous calmness, and his expressions were the same. Even his clothes did not have a trace of breakage. His figure looked like a phantom, as if that attack just passed through his body without doing any damage to him. This is impossible. Akainu's face changed dramatically as he watched such an unbelievable scene. He released his observation Haki to perceive the situation, and he perceives true flesh and blood. That is not a phantom, it is the body of Ross. The expressions on Kizaru and CP0 Chief faces are also changed dramatically, showing a shock. How is Ross able to remain unscathed by that attack? How did he do it? There was complete silence. Nothing is impossible. You don't know enough about my strength, and by the time you understand my strength, everything will be over. Ross, holding the blood-red cursed blade Murasama in his hand, was suspended in the air, overlooking Akainu in the distance and saying calmly. At the moment when his voice fell, he stepped out, crossed the space abruptly, and came in front of Akainu. Resisting the joint efforts of all the people is naturally the ability of the space distortion. Since gaining the power of space distortion, Ross has used it for countless times. His mastery of this power has gradually become more sophisticated, and he can even create an absolute field of space around him by distorting the space. This move is not invincible, but, unless it's an attack that breaks up space or an armament haki that's strong enough to destroy the power of distortion, or a space ability like piercing devil fruits, it's impossible to shake the walls of this distortion space. Any attack will be lost due to the space's distortion. This is a more perfect and powerful absolute defense than the barrier fruit barrier. After blocking the sudden alliance of Akainu and others, Ross once again took a step out of distortion space and came in front of Akainu, sweeping cursed blade Murasama in his hand. In the face of Ross's attack, although it is not clear how Ross blocked such an attack, Akainu forced his mind to restrain those thoughts and resist Ross's attack. But his heart gradually sank to the bottom of the abyss. Such a combination attack did not hurt Ross, and it failed to reverse the situation. The fight is still the same and nothing has changed. He is still in the same situation as he was before, unless Kizaru and others can beat Shiryu of the Rain and Fuso Ermin faster and came to help him against Ross. Sneer. Ross swung his sword and cut Akainu from his waist. Akainu elementalized himself in advance, and at the moment of his body was splitting, he waved toward Ross, and the magma surged rapidly, showing the head of the dog to Ross. Ross's left hand clenched into a fist and swayed. Bang! The fists intersected and Akainu froze for a second, and the whole person rolled backward. Ross stepped out and suddenly caught up with Akainu. The power of distortion continued to erupt, suppressing Akainu's actions, slamming into him like a blasting hammer and slamming his entire body into the collapsed land. Kizaru's face is already depressed and he flickers around, trying to join forces with Akainu to deal with Ross and Shiryu of the Rain, so as to fight them jointly and even join the CP0 chief and win. Get out of here! Faced with the rushing Kizaru, Ross stared coldly and kicked out with a violent kick. It's the fourth time he had fought against Kizaru, and Ross is a little tired of the fight between them. The glint fruit user can no longer bring up any strong warfare. Boom! Kizaru collided with Ross's foot, and after a second of rigidity, the whole person still turned into a streamer and flew backward, unable to compete with Ross in the front. Shiryu of the Rain's face is cold as he charges into Kizaru. As the person who is fighting against Kizaru, he had let Kizaru support Akainu several times now. This is a bit of embarrassment for his part. Although Kizaru's fruit ability is too flexible and too difficult to deal with, he is also a top swordsman and the number 2 character in Ghost Hand Pirates. Chang! Shiryu of the Rain broke out with his strength. Kizaru resisted in a hurry, his forehead was swept by sword energy, and there was a bloodstain. The wrinkles on his face suddenly squeezed more. You're not at all merciful to start with, will you be merciful? Shiryu of the Rain snorted and continued to storm towards Kizaru. With Kizaru's blockade, Akainu was once again alone and he was timely drilled out from the underground, and to stabilize the situation, he attacked Ross with a torrent of magma. But, even so, Ross hasn't been injured so far, but he has been injured several times in a row. After fighting Ross several times, he falls into a disadvantaged position. Dead. Ross's eyes were cold. Instead of giving Kizaru and others a chance to support him this time, his eyes flashed with a cold light. He shouldered Akainu's magma fist and slapped his elbow on Akainu's chest. Injury with injuries. Because Ross's defense is watertight, he has suffered no injuries so far. Akainu neglected Ross's fierce means, and now with these sudden encounters, it is too late to change tactics. Boom! His elbow wrapped in the power of distortion. Akainu flew out 100 meters away. He felt his internal organs began to shift in his body and he almost spit out blood from his mouth, and the coughed out blood even contained the parts of his internal organs. Having withstood such a blow, he has been completely subdued. On the other side, Ross, who resisted Akainu's magma fist, had no shoulder pierced by his attack because of his armament Haki's defense, plus with his rock and maximum value of physical enhancement, he only received severe burns and burns. But alarmingly, his apparently badly burned shoulder, his scorched skin, was recovering at a speed visible to the naked eye, and the flesh and new skin underneath were growing rapidly. It only took a few seconds. The large black skin has become a crusted dead skin, starting to peel off from the edge, revealing the fresh skin inside the white. This guy's body. Seeing this scene, Akainu gritted his teeth and his pupils contracted violently. Ross's body had such a terrifying recovery ability. How many methods is this guy hiding? This resilience, in his memory, seems to have been only possessed by 100 Beast Kaido. Even Garp does not have such a strong self-healing ability. Sakazuki, it's time to withdraw. Kizaru saw Akainu taking a heavy attack and finally completely lost the battle intent. If Akainu is finished, then it will be his turn. Although he has absolute confidence in his speed, Ross has a space-like ability, by which he can keep up with him, and he does not want to be beaten by Ross. Akainu was full of unwillingness, but it was also clear that this battle is done. Completely defeated. At this moment, Marine's morale has also dropped to an all-new low point. Even the headquarters Vice Admiral have almost lost their fighting spirit, not to mention the remaining Marines. Retreat. Following Kizaru's orders, a headquarters Vice Admiral gritted his teeth and screamed out for a retreat. The siege and suppression done by Marines were defeated by the pirates and they were forced to retreat, which is undoubtedly a great shame for Marines. The only thing better is that there are Kizaru and Akainu on it, so the blame will not fall upon the head of Vice Admirals. Bastards, CP0 Chief saw that Marine chose to retreat, and he couldn't help but grit his teeth. There was a reluctant look in his eyes, but there was no way. Marine chose to retreat, and he had to go, and he had to help Marine retreat. Otherwise, no matter which side Ross pursued, there would be heavy casualties on either side. Yada no Kagami, 8-span mirror, Kizaru began to release a wide range of attacks, covering the Marine retreat. Ross continued to storm towards Akainu, trying to kill Akainu on the spot. CP0 Vice Chief got rid of the giants and rushed to support them, and Akainu teamed up with them and fought back. Finally, the 5 battleships were destroyed and the last one was in tattered condition. Kizaru and others helped each other and reluctantly evacuated to the remaining battleship to cover the evacuation of battleship. At this point, Marines are completely defeated. 2 Admiral, plus CP0 Chief, laid a joint attack on the Ghost Hand pirates and failed. On the sea, Ross continues to pursue and seemingly never stooping. When battleship sailed hundreds of meters away on the distant sea under the power of CP0 Chief and others, Ross heard a sound in his ear as he was trying to chase them on the sea. Marine Headquarters, World Government, Joint Operations led by Admiral and CP0 Chief have been defeated, awarding 140 talent proficiency points and 1 free talent points. When he heard this sound, Ross's action paused. Stepping on Geppo, Moonwalk, and following Shiryu of the Rain, Ross stopped and squinted at the battleship in the distance. Do we still pursue? Forget it. Looking at battleship, which has sailed too far, Ross shook his head. Only he and Shiryu of the Rain could chase them across the sea. Even with Akainu being seriously injured, they had no advantage. Shiryu nodded and followed Ross to return to the coast. He actually consumed a lot of stamina, and he was also subjected to a laser by Kizaru. The wound was not serious, but it also affected his battle state. On the shore, Road, the giant Sand and others who could not chase the Marines across the sea, stood at the shore and watched from afar. They saw the Marines fighting and fleeing farther and farther. Ross and Shiryu of the Rain finally returned, and their tense spirit finally relaxed. Each of their figures seems a bit beaten up. Many people have some small injuries, including Ross, but no serious injuries. Everyone looked at each other and no one spoke. Ross's gaze gradually swept away from Shiryu of the Rain and others, and finally, a smile appeared on his face, dispelling all the depression under the sunlight. What? Ha 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 ha. I don't know who did it first, but everyone followed him by laughing. Laughter echoing across the coast. So many Aborigines people on the island looked at this way, showing awe and admiration. Although many people did not watch the complete fight scene, but they saw the second half of the battle. They saw Ross taking on the joint attacks of the Marines without being injured. They saw Ross pounding Akainu on the ground. They saw the Marines retreating in front of Ghost Hand pirates, destroying the terrifying powerhouses of Marine Headquarters. This news is rare and not exaggerated. Even Marine Admiral was defeated by them. It's unbelievable. This is the Ghost Hand pirates, the Emperor of the New World, the 5th Emperor. The people muttered in awe, looking at the people on the shore who were laughing. A few days later, as a result of the battle on the island, the news spread throughout the world. Even if the government and Marine tried their best to cover up with words to safeguard the dignity of Marine and the government, they could not hide the fact that the encirclement and suppression campaign had completely failed. The siege and suppression of Marine admirals were defeated. If the former Ghost Hand Ross and Ghost Hand Pirate Regiment were only known as the 5th Emperor of the New World, and they did not enough power to safeguard that name. Then after this battle, in the eyes of countless people, they are almost equal to the position of New World's fifth emperor, standing at the top of countless pirates. Subsequently, Ghost Hand Pirates' new bounties are also spread to the world. Captain, Ghost Hand Ross's bounty of 1.7 billion berries. The Killer, Shilyu of the Ron, bounty of 1.1 billion berries. Wings of Sky, Fishu Ermin, bounty of 1 billion berries. Demon Sheriff Lafitte, bounty of 380 million berries. Surgeon of Death Trafalgar Law, bounty of 270 million berries. Devil Child Nico Robin, bounty of 200 million berries. Also, the Giant Regiment, which was previously incomplete with bounty, was also released with new complete bounties. Thunder Giant Harridan's bounty reached 530 million berries, Sand Giant got 300 million berries, Metal Giant Stanson received 250 million berries, Iron Wall Giant Goldberg got 220 million berries, and the last Girth received a 50 million berries bounties. The total bounty of the Giant Regiment has reached 1.36 billion berries, and the total bounty of Ghost Hand Pirates is more than 6 billion. Maybe there is a slight lack of power distribution in their sphere of influence, but overall, there is nothing missing. Someone looked at the Ghost Hand Pirates' bounty posters on the table and snorted, and took a deep breath to make a final conclusion. It is enough for them to be tied with the four other. Marine Headquarters. In a temporary room. Doberman just received a real-time report from the front line and then returned to his room. At this moment, he sat there, without a word, and the whole room was silent. Kizaru and Akainu joined forces with CP0 and carried out a comprehensive encirclement of the Ghost Hand Pirates. And even with that kind of lineup, they failed, and this time the other party didn't flee. It is a complete defeat of the Marines and the government's joint army. The Ghost Hand Pirates has grown from a small pirate group to the fifth emperor who can stand firm in New World. Doberman's hands were shaking. His hands were on the table, his fists clenched tightly, and because of that, his hands trembled slightly. If he had not been injured in the previous battle, he would surely have gone to the front line in this campaign of encirclement and suppression. Such campaigns of encirclement and suppression has failed. Even two admirals joining forces with CP0 chief and their members failed, so how can they get the Ghost Hand Pirates now? Assigning the three admiral to chase them is almost impossible, as Fleet Admiral Sengoku can't afford the responsibility if something unexpected happens. Marine can't go out to deal with a Yonko, four emperors, and it's equally impossible to send a huge force to New World to deal with the Ghost Hand Pirates because the uncertainty is too great. Doberman clenched his fists. Suddenly, he thought that this is not desperate. New World has Yonko, four emperors, in addition to the Ghost Hand Pirates. Yes, there is Yonko, four emperors, the guy who has provoked 100 Beast Kaido, and Kaido will find him sooner or later. At that time, there is a chance to kill the Ghost Hand Pirates. Doberman looked up suddenly, his eyes shining again. Impel Down has a lot of big-named pirates that are being held in because of this reason, because they overdraft their stamina in their fight and then they're taken by Marines. Marines don't care about the process, they only care about the result. If the Ghost Hand Pirates and the Beast Pirates fought, then Marines only needs to send an admiral out to observe. There is a great chance to become a fisherman and capture Ross, who will be weaker after his fight. It doesn't matter if Kaido has an immortal body and they can't kill him or imprison him, but it's enough if he can exterminate Ross and the Ghost Hand Pirate Regiment. Who? Doberman took a deep breath and relaxed his fists slightly. He regained his calm, with a cold shimmer in his eyes. At this time, a Marine captain suddenly came in from the outside. Reporting. Vice Admiral Doberman, this is a document sent to you by Dr. Vegapunk of the Science Force. The Marine captain came in and handed over a sealed document to Doberman. Vegapunk. Doberman narrowed his eyes slightly and motioned the captain to retreat. He slowly tore open the envelope and took out the document from it. He looked at it carefully and his expression immediately became cloudy and uncertain. New World. Somewhere on the snow-capped island, there is a hole. 100 Beast Kaido sat cross-legged, with two long black beards fluttering and shaking, and in front of him was a set of bounty posters, the top of which was a bounty of 1.7 billion berries, which was Ross's bounty poster. Kaido touched the back of his head. Very capable, that kid. Marines caught him and he just came out. He destroyed the Marine headquarters and fought with Marines again. Marines aren't really getting any better at all. Hearing the low and dissatisfied voice of Kaido, the subordinates of some of the Beast Pirates next to him glanced at each other and swallowed their saliva. Someone took out Ross's bounty order, saying, "But Kaido-sama, we can't underestimate this Ghost Hand Ross, destroying the marine fortress in front of the fleet admiral and leading the Ghost Hand pirates to win against marine admirals." Huh? Kaido's drooping eyelids suddenly opened and stared at the pirate who spoke. Suddenly, Kaido stood up, his huge body standing in the cave, and a terrible momentum exploded in the cave, causing everyone around him to sit on the ground in horror. Underestimate him, so what? Kaido's voice exploded here like thunder, making people's eardrum buzz. Who do you think I am? Did you ask me if I agree or not before you become an emperor in the New World? The voice dropped. Kaido picked up the wine gourd and poured it into his mouth. He said in a cool voice after drinking, "Go, call Jack and others back. We are going to teach a kid that he can't be an emperor in the New World." At sea. The giant pirate ship of the giant family is sailing on the sea. After the battle with Marine and the defeat of the Marines, the people took a little rest on the island, loaded and unloaded some food and fresh water, then boarded the ship and left the island and sailed the New World. Whoop, the wind has changed. On the deck, Lafitte was measuring the wind direction and current. After noticing the change of the wind direction, he turned his mahogany stick and shouted at the rear, "Put up the side sail and get wind in the west." As Lafitte's voice fell, a bunch of strange-looking toys rushed out, unfastened the rope of the sail, and began to hang the sail according to Lafitte's instructions. These toys naturally come from Sugar. After catching the Sugar from Dressrosa, she has been detained on the ship. These toys were attacked by Ghost Hand pirates. After being caught by Lafitte and others, they changed Sugar into toys to act as free handyman and sailor on the boat. In the presence of Lafitte and Law and so many terrifying people, how dare Sugar not obey? One of them is plain weird. The other wants to slice her up for research, and even give her biochemical modification. Naturally. Because Ross mentioned the usefulness of Sugar's ability, Lafitte and others are just making the best use of it. In addition to intimidating her and using her abilities, she is locked in a separate small room. Ghost Hand. In the Sugar room, Ross did not know when to go in, but in the room, Sugar was shrinking in the corner of the bed, pulling the quilt, and looking at Ross while trembling. For her, Ross can be described as the most terrible existence in the Ghost Hand pirates. Doflamingo was defeated by Ross, not to mention, he escaped from the Impel Down, destroyed the Marine headquarters, and defeated Marine Admiral. "Call me Captain." Ross calmly opened his mouth and stared at Sugar and thought thoughtfully. Sugar's ability is very useful, but it also has a corresponding danger. After all, one will become a toy when they are touched and will be forgotten by others. This is a very terrifying ability. However, it was precisely because this ability was too dangerous that Lafitte hypnotized Sugar so that she dared not walk out of the small room or disobey the people on board. Ship, Captain. Sugar huddled there in fear, trembling, wondering what Ross was going to do with her.